I'm going to call the East Lansing City Council meeting of Tuesday, October 8, 2019 to order. Welcome, everybody. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Byer?
Here.
Councilmember Draheim?
Here.
Councilmember Stevens?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Allman?
Here.
Mayor Meadows?
Here. Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
Been moved by the Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Stevens. Any changes? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting of September 17th, 2019. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Draheim, seconded by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any changes to those? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is communications section. All written communications that council has received, just it's a notification, go on our website and you can access any communications that we received as of the time the agenda was prepared. And then the next item on our agenda is communications from persons in the audience. We have a whole bunch of public hearings this evening, so if you came for one of those, you will have an opportunity to speak at that time, but if you choose to speak right now, you can do that as well. So anybody in the audience can approach the microphone and speak on any item on or off the agenda at this time. Welcome, Mr. Hank.
Welcome, Mayor. Jeffrey Hank, 349 Division. What I want to show you here, these are initiative petitions with enough signatures for a marijuana ordinance, an adult use marijuana ordinance, that we're going to debate on filing. I don't know if you're aware that your city attorney is taking a position that's contrary to what other cities are doing. Under new Prop 1, residents are able to pass an initiative with 5% of voter signatures. City attorney, Mr. Yaden, thinks that all we're able to do is set the number. Other cities such as Allen Park and Mount Pleasant are voting on something this year where they're doing something more than that. So if I file this and that's the position taken, we're going to end up in litigation. So I don't know if you're aware that your city attorney is taking this anti-democratic position. That's what it is. It's excluding the voice of residents who signed this petition. One of the reasons we're doing this, as you may know, is East Lansing was one of 19 cities originally picked as a social equity community by the state of Michigan for higher than average marijuana arrests, higher than average poverty levels. The state wants to see 50% of marijuana licenses in the hands of social equity applicants. To be a social equity applicant, you have to be a resident of East Lansing for the past 5 years. You potentially also could be a caregiver or someone who's faced a marijuana conviction in the past. Under the current system, it appears that you're taking some of the current applicants' sort of company line to just give recreational licenses or adult use licenses to the same 4 or 5 people who've already gotten one in town. The majority of people that I spoke to in getting these petitions said something to me like, what about the eBay sale? Why is council not taking care of residents? What is going on? Why don't we have dispensaries in town? Why are there none downtown? That was the most common refrain. Most people were willing to sign the petition. Most people were willing to support marijuana in town. Most people wanted to know why you 5 engaged in the process that you did. So I'm here to tell you tonight, I'm going to hold off on filing this if you're going to wait a couple weeks to do a social equity ordinance. We expect you to do something about social equity. This is a community with higher than average marijuana arrests. Do something about it. Lansing City Council debated it. They were told by their attorney we need findings to include social equity in the ordinance. They didn't do that. But Lansing's not a social equity community. East Lansing is. So 50% of licenses in this town, and we're not talking about the little licenses to give the peasants like breadcrumbs. We want full licenses, retail licenses, dispensary licenses to go to East Lansing residents, particularly people who've been affected by the war on drugs, which we know disproportionately impacted minority communities, and we know disproportionately impacted people in the city of East Lansing. So I'd also rather not file these because this didn't include social equity. I didn't have this, the rules set when we wrote this. I'm prepared to do another one, and I'm prepared to repeal what you pass if it doesn't include social equity. So you've got an opportunity. I'm just going to be frank. You screwed up the first time. Everybody makes mistakes. You get a second chance. But people, 2 of you are up for a re-election, and people are watching this. So you got a chance to do the right thing. Everybody gets a second chance. So we hope you do the right thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. And I assume we're going to hear about this from the city attorney. I think that's the first time I heard about this conversation, but I'll note that When we received the notice with regard to our standing, it took me by surprise since we haven't really written any criminal tickets relating to marijuana in probably since 1968. So it just, I'm not sure why we ended up on that list, but it might be because we do have a significant number of people who are under the poverty level within the community, if that's the criteria. So I would like a report on this, actually. Not necessarily tonight, but certainly something in writing that comes to the council. All right.
I can give you just a brief synopsis of the issue from what I see it, if you'd like. There are some provisions in the Act which allow initiatory petitions to be obtained with a lot less votes than our charter, or a lot less signatures than our charter would require. Some of these petitions that I've seen in other communities go well beyond just simply the Act provisions and have a number of different zoning restrictions and restrictions well beyond what I see that the Act allows. So that's where the difference of opinion comes, is how expansive are you going to read this Act to restrict council's ability to zone from neighborhoods and those types of things. So that's the real question from my perspective.
I still like a
I'll
more
give you a
detailed,
report.
recitation. Anybody else in the audience who wishes to address council at this time on anything on or off the agenda?
Alice Dreger, 621 Sunset Lane. I would just like to know what the actual data is on both the poverty level and the issue of marijuana convictions. The reason I ask is because I'm surprised that you said you don't think there's been a lot. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. You're talking about tickets and I'm thinking of something else, but there was a man in our neighborhood who committed suicide because he was facing 10 years for marijuana convictions and killed himself in his house in our neighborhood over marijuana convictions, sending him to jail for 10 years. So I know he at least was facing, this was about 10, 15 years ago, but he at least was facing a long prison time over marijuana. He was a dealer, but he was facing a long prison time. So I would love it if we could get the data on both of these things, on the issue of income levels in East Lansing and also the issue of the marijuana history.
Yeah, and I would like to see that as well. And I might add that I wasn't necessarily relating this to a dealer. I was relating to the fact that we write appearance tickets for marijuana possession in the city of East Lansing. We've done for decades. And actually, we had a change in our charter with the result of a petition that was presented by Mr. Hank that decriminalized marijuana, a small amount of marijuana possession in our community, and we implemented that, I think, in 2016. I think we passed the ordinance that implemented that provision. So we're just not writing tickets for it. You know, we permit people to enjoy recreational marijuana on private property. So I don't know what these tickets would have been, but I asked actually when we saw that newspaper report, can we get some information on this? It just seemed odd that we were included there. I don't know whether the university writes a bunch of tickets and maybe that's attributed to us. So I would like to know some more information with regard to that. All right, anybody else?
Good evening, Mike Corcoran from Traverse City. I'm an attorney at 800 Cottage View in Traverse City, and I'm here for a matter that's on the consent agenda later tonight. That's ABCD LLC, or ABCD Properties LLC, and it's a conditional rezoning request. Before I get to that, I just want to say, as a positive note, was at my 1979 East Lansing reunion 3 weeks ago at the Marriott, and the changes that you all have done in downtown were very favorably received, and I thought you all would like to hear that. We were last before you in April when you were all in the very enviable position of having to choose between 4 different site plans on the side of Grand River that the ABCD properties located, the old Odie's Big Ten Party Store. After that, my clients frankly took a wait-and-see approach, given the situation A lot of the folks that were approved have not really made much, if any, progress as far as we can see. In fact, the folks down at 1234 Grand River still have kids living in the facility and under leases until June. And so my clients, frankly, decided, let's figure out what we're going to do. They put their liquor license in escrow. In July, we received a parking variance consistent with the site plan that we submitted to y'all. So it called for chopping down the building a little bit so we could make 2 spaces in front and 2 spaces in back and handle the parking ratios. And so at that point, my clients were really trying to decide their legal options, and what's before you or on the consent calendar later is a request for a conditional rezoning for medical marijuana facility subject to site plan approval. The offer is several conditions, mainly one of which is we're going to forever end the facility as a beer liquor store as one of the conditions offered. I've had spirited debate with Mr. Haywood and Mr. Yaden about whether or not we're entitled to conditional rezoning. Remember, this was a medical marijuana overlay district, so this was a zoning response, and this was a zoning overlay district you all passed. My belief is I can go from one conditional rezone from one overlay to another. I recognize that's a unique request, but I think it's one that's supported in the law and not unsupported by the law. And so basically what we're asking for at the end of the night is that you send it to Planning Commission on that issue, and let us, see if we can establish the requisites for a conditional rezoning. We've also asked for a variance, and I'm not sure where we'll end up with that, but we have asked for a variance because we're 672 feet from the other facility that is not open. And so that is also it's not something you guys have to decide tonight. I'm just letting you all know that. The third option, and this is an interesting issue, is that your ordinance says no, that we can't operate within 1,000 feet of a facility. Well, there is no facility right now, and I know Lansing's dealing with this very issue with very similar language. And so one of the options may be, hey, you don't need to go to Planning Commission. If you all want to resubmit a site plan for approval, you're free to do that until such time as they are a facility. And I don't know where that line is, but they're not real close to opening anytime soon. Frankly, my guys own the property. If they were to receive conditional rezoning or a variance and then subject to site plan approval and come back before you all, probably would be open before most of the other folks that receive site plan approval. So we're just asking tonight that you send us to Planning Commission to further the question.
Thank you for your comments. I just want to clear up one thing. You're not on the consent agenda. You're on the business agenda.
Oh, I'm
You're
sorry.
the last item for the night.
Oh,
So-
well, wonderful. Maybe I'll go get a bite to eat and come back. Thanks. Be a nice drive back to Traverse City.
Get a night's sleep again.
All right, is there anybody else? All right, I'm going to close that portion of the agenda. Next item on our agenda is communications from council members. Councilmember Stevens, anything you would like to tell the public?
Yeah, sure. So I put out a little statement on this a little while ago, but I wanted to talk about it a little bit here. And it wasn't formalized until late last week, so I couldn't give kind of any news about this, but I was selected with a group of other elected officials in the state of Michigan to travel to Artsakh. Artsakh is a territory that is currently controlled by Azerbaijan. The population there is primarily Armenian. They primarily speak Armenian. And luckily, my family history, I'm half Armenian on my father's side. And so another Armenian elected official in the state of Michigan, State Rep Mari Manougian, reached out to me a couple months ago and said, hey, there's this trip, this delegation that's going to Armenia to hear about their fight for independence. And they were looking for other Armenian elected officials within the state, and I thought of you. And so it wasn't formalized until late last week. when I got some flight plans and different things arranged. But I'm lucky enough to be attending that forum. I know that there are some United States Congress people, as well as the Speaker of the House in Michigan going, as well as another state rep. So I'm really looking forward to it. This is an incredible opportunity, and yeah, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to see the country where my family was. So.
When do you get back?
And I will get back by Monday on next week. So if I'm not responding to emails at that time, it might be because of shoddy signal or not access to internet. But I will attempt to respond to everything that I get back to by Monday when I get back. So thank you.
Just to add one thing to that, he's leaving for the airport as soon as this meeting is over at 4 a.m. So.
Yeah, I'm heading straight here to the Michigan Flyer, so see me on the bus stop, say hi.
Anything from you?
No, I need to help him catch his flights.
Okay. Councilmember Draheim, Mayor Pro Tem?
No report, thank you.
Two things I want to mention, and I'm sure most of the people in the community have noticed this in the newspaper because I think there has been a couple of obituary notices with regard to it. But we lost two very important members of the East Lansing community in the since the last council meeting. One, Dave Ballas, was a longtime council member, a great citizen of the city of East Lansing who passed away after a pretty extensive illness just a while ago. And Carolyn Stell, a groundbreaking first female judge in Ingham County, a great judge, I might add. Somebody who, really cracked the whip in the courtroom. You better be prepared when you appeared before Carolyn, and really just a tremendous person and a tremendous citizen of the city of East Lansing. So I think it's easy for me to say that the families of both Dave Ballas and Carolyn Stell are in our prayers, and we really wish the best for them. And it's a great loss for the entire community. The next item on our agenda is the city manager's report. Mr. Lahannis.
Thank you, Your Honor. No report this evening.
And the city attorney's report.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to bring the council's attention that we've had some criticisms over our current enforcement of the SDM and SDD liquor license enforcement in the city. And I wrote a memo to council to that effect, and staff is asking that get placed on a discussion-only agenda sometime in the near future so that we can have a broader discussion about that.
And are you requesting that it be there? Yeah, I think it's next week, our next, 22nd. 22nd, okay.
If that works for council,
that works. All right, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Mr. Lahannis.
We have the following items on the consent agenda for council's consideration. Item 3.1, approve the following appointments or reappointments to boards or commissions. Michael Davis to the Building Board of Appeals for a partial term ending December 31st, 2021. Madison Chase to the University Student Commission for a partial term ending September 30th, 2020. Darrell Irvin to the University Student Commission for a partial term ending September 30, 2020. Georgia Frost to the University Student Commission for a partial term ending September 30, 2020. Austin McCoy to the University Student Commission for a partial term ending September 30, 2020. Don Ewan to the University Student Commission for a partial term ending September 30, 2020. Emily Smith to the University Student Commission for a partial term ending September 30, 2020. Kate Vernier to the University Student Commission for a partial term ending September 30, 2020. Ann Earhart to the Commission on the Environment for a full term ending December 31st, 2021. Jessica Crawford to the Commission on the Environment for a partial term ending December 31st, 2020. And Audrey Yunkus to the Commission on the Environment for a full term and beginning January 1st, 2020 and going until December 31st, 2022. Item 3.2, approve a resolution authorizing Peter Dewan to sign a memorandum of agreement regarding the administration of the Lansing Regional Brownfields Coalition grants. Item 3.3, approve an entertainment license for 521 East Grand River Avenue, the Peanut Barrel, for live music on Sundays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Item 3.4, approve a contract with Leavitt and Starck Excavating, Inc. for an as-needed contractor services agreement for the Michigan Avenue water main improvements to replace approximately 200 feet of 8-inch water main west of Highland Avenue as an emergency interconnect with the Lansing Board of Water and Light at an estimated budget cost of $85,000, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.5, set a public hearing for November 12, 2019 to consider a site plan and special use permit application from GTW Investment Properties, LLC, for the properties at 710, 722, and 722.5 Grove Street to demolish the existing structures and construct a 3-story building for a sorority. Item 3.6, approve an agreement with Restore Consulting for parking facilities condition assessments in the amount of $17,863 with 20% contingency, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.7, approve a street closure request for MAC Avenue from Bircham Drive to the Lot 12 driveway, Marriott Garage, from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday, October 27, 2019, for Michigan State University Greek Life's Safe Halloween event. Item 3.8, approve Grove Street alley closure, use of amplified sound, and facility use of Ann Street Plaza, Sharp Park, and the 500 block alleyway during the Great Pumpkin Walk event on October 27, 2019, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Item 3.9, set a public hearing for October 29, 2019 to consider Ordinance 1469, an ordinance to allow for and regulate adult-use marijuana provisioning centers. Item 3.10, set a public hearing for November 12, 2019 to consider Ordinance 1468, a rezoning application from GTW Investment Properties, LLC, to rezone the properties at 710, 722, and 722.5 Grove Street from R2 medium-density single-family residential to RM32, city center multiple family residential. Item 3.11, introduce and set for the October 29, 2019 business agenda, Ordinance 1475, an ordinance to authorize the city manager to approve electric skateboard parking locations. Item 3.12, approve a date change for the public hearing on Ordinance 1462, originally scheduled for October 29, 2019, to be moved to December 17, 2019. Those are all the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
Okay. Does any council member wish to remove any of these items to the business agenda? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by the Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Draheim. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is the first of many public hearings this evening. This is consideration of a site plan and special use permit application from HSV Park Place LLC for the properties at 314, 328, 334, and 340 Evergreen Avenue. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address council on this particular item, item number 4.1? I'll give you an opportunity, but I'm looking for everybody else. All right, why don't you step up, Brett?
Good evening, Brent Titus, Foster, Swift, Collins, and Smith, here on behalf of HSV. Mayor has obviously introduced this and what this is about. I want to note that this property in question has also and is in the process of being requested for a conditional rezoning to B3 based on the Planning Commission's preference that they just not grant a wide open B3 zoning to this site, that they want to have input and control what happens here in the future. So we're in the process of doing that. We did sign a purchase agreement with the DDA for the purchase of this property. So that is pending, and they've authorized the rezoning request, and they've also sent you a letter, which would be at the very end of your packet, requesting this consideration for this site plan and special use permit. So in short, this building is you have a site plan and various materials and building designs from August 23rd by Ghaffari, the architect, for a 9-story, 110-foot tall, basically 312,000 square foot building. The first floor of that building, 22,400 square feet, would be commercial. There'd be 184 apartments on floors 2 through 9. 32 one-bedroom, 113 two-bedroom, 39 three-bedroom. That's less than 25% of the larger units that are typically marketed to students. And so this is a mixed market project. It has 2 levels of underground parking with 138 spaces, including the required 7 barrier-free and 3 electric vehicle charging stations, 58 bike parking spaces. It has various amenities, including basically 2 green roofs, one on the second floor, one on the top floor of about 4,000 square feet each. It would have rooftop fitness and club room. There'd be outdoor patio dining. The site is a little less than an acre. It meets the building coverage requirement with, and the maximum ground coverage requirement with those qualifying features, those rooftop decks, outdoor dining, et cetera. Meets all setback requirements, including an issue we're going to get to later, an excess height issue. We're set back sufficiently from the RM32 on the north or rear side of this project. This project is surrounded on 3 sides by B3 zoning on the south, the east, and the west. And on the north, it's RM32, which this property is also currently zoned. The development will replace, as you are well aware, what is primarily student housing, functionally obsolete single-family homes, a small apartment building, and a mixed-use building with 9 residential units and 2 office suites. This development meets all of the site plan standards. The goal of the master plan is to increase housing opportunities in the downtown area, which this project does, because it has 25% low to moderate income housing as a component, which doesn't exist downtown. It has market rate apartments, which limit the 3-bedroom student rentals, which typically target 3 and or 4-bedroom or more units. I know there's others seeking larger units than that, so this will decrease the market to students. It's compatible with the existing structures and proposed structures to the west and the south, and the business to the east, which is Dublin Square. There are no natural features or wetlands to be impacted. This development will result in more trees than currently exist on the site. If the whole development is approved, including the infrastructure improvements, it would improve utilities and public service, including the extension of a water main west of Valley Court, the extension of a 36-inch combined sewer north through Evergreen, extension of Albert Avenue west of Valley Court. It adds bike lanes, wide sidewalks, street parking, landscaping, lighting, converts Evergreen to a pedestrian way, which is one of the things that the city was looking for. Creates no risk of environmental concerns because it's primarily residential and light commercial. In fact, it would result in some cleanup of contamination on the city's Lot 8 in connection with the reconfiguration of that lot. It would promote public safety and welfare with improved water and sewer, safer designed streets and sidewalks, wider, better lighting, bike lanes, crosswalks, all those updates according to modern conveniences and desires. It's consistent with the master plan for higher density mixed residential and commercial uses. It meets the standards for the special use permit under 5094. The proposed use is consistent with the sought B3 district, again with the higher residential and commercial densities. It, as previously noted, improves public health, safety, and welfare in the form of utilities and infrastructure. The proposed building is 9 stories in height, which is consistent in architectural character with the existing buildings like the Graduate, the Abbott, and even the proposed building to the west, which would be additional housing. You've got a traffic study on this, which shows that there's no material adverse impacts on traffic. This use, which is primarily residential and low commercial, would not create excess noise, vibration, light, glare, odors. I would state that the adjoining properties would be improved in value by the upgrade to all of these infrastructure improvements, including the utilities and streetscapes, so it won't diminish them. This development is located on two major streets currently, Albert and Evergreen. This development also meets the specific requirements for multifamily uses in a business district for the SUP under 50-94B4, which is that the first floor is primarily a principal use in that district, which is going to be a public market and restaurant incubator. It's compatible with adjacent development patterns, particularly what's going on Grand River and what's proposed to the west of this site. It has reasonable open space and yards, lawn, and trees around Albert and Evergreen, the rooftop gardens, and outdoor dining areas previously mentioned, proximity to the park, Valley Court Park. And, all these uses that we're proposing are compatible with each other and actually feed off each other and will benefit each other. Again, there's a limited number of 3-bedroom units. There's no 4-bedroom or larger units. There's low to moderate income housing proposed. Then there's additional building height requirements or standards for additional building height. We've provided a shadow study which shows that the impact of this building is probably less than previous projects that have been approved, and it won't cause excess noise, shadows, or anything like that. Setbacks are met. And I guess the last issue to discuss is under 50-593F, which provides that in the B3 districts, buildings can be up to 8 stories or 112 foot in height if they have a residential component, which this one does. Staff's interpreted this ordinance to mean if either of those are exceeded, then it requires a 3/4 vote of City Council. While we dispute that that's the proper interpretation, that is contrary to the interpretation that my client received all along when they applied for this project and rezoning. But in any event, I don't think that's a hurdle because this building does contribute substantially to the desirable mix of commercial, residential, social, cultural, and employment opportunities with the public market and the low to moderate income housing. The public market restaurant incubator, which we have someone from MSU to speak about, we think is a unique opportunity for this area that the city of East Lansing downtown is ripe for and will benefit the community. So those are some benefits of this building. The other benefits of this building is the improved utilities, the improved streetscapes, and another big public benefit of this project is that it allows the DDA to recover a significant investment of over $5 million in this property. I don't think that's going to happen without a significant project on this site. It gets rid of obsolete buildings and uses from the area. So while that budget consideration of the DDA budget may not have been caused by the current DDA or the current city council, it is important to note that that's costing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year out of the DDA's budget to that could be turned around. If you go with a different route on this project, it's going to be potentially years down the road before you get there. We have provided evidence of funding for this project, so that's not speculative. We provided a letter of MSHDA support for this project, showing that MSHDA would like to see this project in East Lansing. I think Dr. Jeff Ellsworth is here to talk about the restaurant incubator concept, which would be part of the public market. We've provided a letter from Project for Public Spaces, which develops these kind of projects all over and is excited about working with us and MSU on this public market concept. And also, I want to note that the architect, Tom Tooley of Ghaffari, is here if there's questions about the building. Sorry for talking so fast. I don't know if I talked as fast as the city manager, but I gave it my best shot.
All right.
Any questions?
of Mr. Titus? Go ahead.
I just want to make a note that you had said that MSHDA, you just to clarify, they are considering the funding of this at this point. That's what you provided.
They really aren't intended to fund it. The
No.
funding is really in the form of tax credits.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
but the letter that you provided said that's under consideration, not that they.
That's
committed.
just what they say in the letter. We don't need MISTA funding. We have funding from a British Columbia pension fund, which should be in the file.
That's fine. I just didn't want to
Yeah.
misrepresent that.
No, yeah. A letter of support from MISTA for this project, not financial support directly, but through the term of tax credits.
Sure.
All right, any other questions, Mr. Titus? All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, this still is a public hearing. Does anyone wish to address council with regard to it before I close the public hearing?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Ellsworth. I'm Associate Professor of Hospitality Business Entrepreneurship in the College of Business and the School of Hospitality Business at Michigan State. And I'm here to help provide some expertise in the area of what we consider to be a food hall and restaurant incubator space. The word that the gentleman used, market, might be a bit of a misnomer. If you think of market as a fresh garden type of market or a farmer's market. What they propose for this space is actually a food hall. Food halls have been around since, relatively new, but they've been around since around 2010. You'll probably, if you were been in Chicago or you've been in New York or been in Detroit or even in Grand Rapids, you've seen examples of very successful food halls. Right now, there's somewhere between 180 and 200 food halls in the United States. They've been very successful in all the places that they've been placed. There's been research done by Cushman Wakeman that shows that there's only been 3 failures of 180 since 2017. The difference between a food hall and what you would consider to be a food court, which is sort of the idea that many people have in their mind if they've never experienced one before, is that food courts typically are franchise companies that come in and they're usually fast food type of venues. And the venue, whatever it is, like the mall or you know, whatever kind of type of place it is, will seek out franchises to come in and they'll then open up those fast food restaurants. Food halls are much different. Food halls are curated. They typically will have a board of advisors attached to them that will take requests for proposals. They'll look at all the different possibilities. In some cases, they might be well-known chefs who have small concepts that they would like to start. In other cases, they will be true entrepreneurs, people who maybe have had a food truck or maybe a catering business that would like to open their own business. In most cases, they're a combination of both. So they have both both somebody who probably has some sort of name to them, as well as people who are really just trying to start their own business. If you look at a couple of examples that are close to us, in particular, the one over in Grand Rapids has been extremely successful. The research has been done by Grand Valley State, really says that as a public-private project, and this would be just a private project, so this would not include any state money or any other type of money, as I understand it. They have been able to produce this, they call it a market there, that's has over 20 venues in it right now. They have an economic impact, positive economic impact of over $31 million, and have 330 direct jobs attributed to this project. They've assisted in the creation of over 500 businesses, both in the incubators, through their incubator space, both in the market itself and outside the market by working with different entrepreneurs. They have successful businesses there. I know you're probably familiar with Sweet Delicious, who's right up here in DeWitt. She has a venue over there. It's right in the front door when you walk in, and it attracts quite a bit of attention. So the proposal that they have here would be to have a food hall. And so the idea would be that the food hall we would put out, some offers. People would bring in either, like I said, it could be somebody who's well-known or it could be somebody who's a brand-new entrepreneur. We would have a board of advisors. That board of advisors would be community leaders, people who have some interest in the restaurant business, and they would make decisions about, okay, what's the best interest for this food hall? So is it what would have the best chance for success? And for the people who are accepted, we would give them guidance, give them some opportunities. That one of the big advantages of a food hall is that you have economy of scale. So you don't have to worry about, do I have to pay for utilities? Am I going to have to pay out the infrastructures? Another great advantage is that you can have both places where people cook, so you can have a hooded system around the periphery, and in the middle system you can have, some type of maybe sandwich or ice cream type of venues on top. But then on top of that, you could even have, other retail things, T-shirt shops, somebody sells flowers. In the space that they're talking about, it could be anywhere from probably 15 to 20, depending upon the size of each one of the little entities that they were to establish. The incubator part of this would be available to anybody, and to be basically a consulting arm of the space. And so obviously people who need that help and want to be in the space, they'd be curated and help with that space. People who might want to open up other restaurants in East Lansing, or other retail for that matter in East Lansing, the downtown area, or other places in East Lansing may come in and also take advantage of that incubator space. Of course, we don't have a finished proposal, so we don't know exactly what that space would look like. We don't know, for instance, whether we would have kitchen incubator space or it would be business incubator space, but you can imagine all those things are probably possible depending upon what they're interested in. Like I said, there's several great examples. If you look at Chicago area, I think right now there are 9 food halls in the Chicago area. There are 4 in Detroit. New York City has probably 20. Obviously, those are all really big venues, or really big cities. But it's something that could be very successful here. We're talking about well over 10,000 people who are in very close proximity of this venue. You'll have people who are staying in that new Graduate Hotel that would love to go to someplace where they could get a quick bite to eat, maybe have a nice cocktail, maybe sit with their friends and neighbors and just enjoy downtown East Lansing. So I think it's the kind of thing that we really could use in this market. And also, just one other thing to put into this, I've just recently was aware of Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, has a concept similar to this that they've placed inside of an apartment complex on the peripheral of their campus. It's called Crave. It's also a place that's been vetted out. I don't think they're actually using incubator space, but they do have local businesses that are associated with it, and it's been very popular. It's just been open since fall semester. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have. And
Go ahead.
yes.
So you mentioned, I did have a question about your last thing. So you mentioned that there's been 180 days, they haven't failed.
Right.
You ticked off quite a few cities, and I'm familiar with a lot of these. I love and have visited many of them, but it does seem to me that most of these are in larger cities. So like of that 180, do you know what the market size for most of those are?
Yeah, they obviously, Lansing, East Lansing is population-wise doesn't sort of match with other places, but you have to remember a lot of these are neighborhoods in cities.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the kinds of places we'd be looking at would be like Portland, Oregon. They have a couple, and they have a couple of new ones that are going up. They have one in particular that's been very successful. I'd have to do more research on it to tell you the truth. There have, with 180 nationwide,
Yeah.
there's plenty of successful businesses around.
Sure, and I would guess that would be part of a market analysis when
Yeah.
they're going to get to that point. But, and I think the other part of that question, and again, some of this is just because without having that market study, is sort of what amount of subsidy and sort of how those were financed and funded. So like the Grand Rapids one, which I love and have been to many times, but it's subsidized. It's subsidized by the city. It's subsidized. They got a very large MEDC loan for that. There are still issues with that they're paying for on that. So I just,
they're paying down. From what I understand, it's the loan is only $3 million, which they're still paying down. But they had about $18 million in public money and $12 million in private money.
right.
This would be all private money. So in terms of funding, what you'd be looking at for the people who are interested in being in this place, they would apply. There would be a licensing agreement made with whoever, whether it's the name of the company, whatever group it ends up being that owns the property. They would make a license agreement with those people. There would be certain contracts that were written up in terms of what kinds of equipment come with it. And it usually, and typically, these are somewhere between 1 and 3 year projects, because what we're trying to do is to, as an incubator space, is to get them to move out of the food hall and into their own venue someplace. The point is they get all this clout. People can see the place. They say, we love this place. Are you ever going to get out of this food hall and move into a nice, freestanding restaurant in East Lansing? And their answer should be, yeah, if we could fund us, if you're able to help, we would love to get out of here. And then there will be a couple of concepts that will want to stay there because that's sort of their home. And that would be the kind of thing. Take, for instance, Sweetylicious. If they were to move into that space like they did in Grand Rapids, they obviously would be an anchor, and so they probably would not want to leave. But you could have, Jim Smith and his wife who have a nice little taco place, and they may want to do some type of, Mexican food, traditional Mexican food, and have their space in there too, and then eventually move out of there into their own restaurant. And that's what the incubator space would be for, to help those people.
Go ahead.
So, first off, Professor, I just want to thank you for coming here today and for your interest in, kind of going across the street and working with. I think it's a good thing, especially as a recent graduates, opportunities for students to get involved in their community and have opportunities for them to grow maybe their own business in there. So I just want to give kudos to that, and I think it's definitely something that was explored before and as indicated in your letter, and we should continue exploring more opportunities to do so. So my question is more revolving around the School of Hospitality Businesses involvement. So they're not proposing at this point, and you can only speak for yourself, correct? This is not
speaking only for myself.
right, and so you're not speaking on behalf of the school itself. But do you have any indication that they, because we did talk about the Grand Rapids market being a little bit subsidized, incubator space, that's payment for consulting, it's payment for helping out. I mean, what is the arrangement you think going to be to help people?
I can't really honestly tell you until we know what the proposal is.
Okay.
I mean, it's not, I can't be, I can tell you, here's what I can tell you. I can tell you what the original proposal in 2010 was.
Sure.
All right, so in 2010, we were working on an incubator space in what is now Hopcat.
Sure.
That space, the proposal was that my students at that time would have a class, and the class would be where the students came in and actually helped build that building out. Not obviously the construction part, but marketing, finance, operations. And then once the place is built and it starts to run, they would then be people who would be available as consultants
Okay.
for those people.
I guess, and again, I'm super excited about, this potential, but I'm wary just because I know that there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Sure.
And, I'm wondering whether that work comes from the developer, the operator, the School of Hospitality Business.
It doesn't come from the school. It's going to come from the developer and the operator with the help of the school.
Okay.
The school will only be in there in order to help educate students in, this is a experiential project that you can help work on.
Okay. All right. Thank you for
Sure.
answering the question.
Go ahead.
What's your understanding of the applicant's proposal?
The proposal in terms of the space, or, I've just read it. I mean, I've read, whatever you've read in your agenda, I've read all that.
I guess I'm asking what you think is going to go into that space. You mentioned at one point.
I think from what I've looked at it, I think it's going to be apartments and a public space. The public space is right now about 20,000 square feet, but that includes the whole public space, of which the food hall would probably be a portion of that. The sweet spot for food halls is somewhere between 10 and 12,000 square feet.
You mentioned at one point in your remarks that you weren't sure whether it was going to be a business incubator or a kitchen incubator, I think.
No, that would be what in terms of the build out. If you wanted to put a kitchen incubator in, you would have a part of that building, small part, it would have kitchen in it and would have like ovens and fryers and things like that. The people could then come in and you can bottle your own sauce or make cookies or whatever it is you may want to do as a catering company or as a retail salesperson. The business incubator would be where it would just be an office. And if people who are interested in opening a business, whether it's in there or someplace else, might be able to come in and have some people talk to them.
So I guess my question is, what's your understanding of what the build-out is going to be in that first floor space?
I don't have any understanding until it's done. I try not to get myself, my hopes up until I've seen the actual space approved and we start working on it. I mean, what do you? I don't understand what else I could say. I mean, I don't really know what it'll look like until it's actually approved. Once it's approved, I'm hoping it'll look similar to other food halls. 10 to 12,000 square feet would have space for maybe up to 20 vendors, probably a bar, a lot of public space for people to sit down and eat.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I do have a question, and I'm not concentrating on the failures, but I want to know what you know about the three failures that you mentioned
poor
in
location.
terms of a couple of things
Yeah.
that were brought up previously. The population of the area in which those failures were located is an important consideration.
Right.
So can you
Yeah,
just tell me?
the three that the two of the three, I'm not sure exactly what the third one was, but I know two of them, one was in New York, one was in Chicago, and they were both bad neighborhoods. I mean, not bad neighborhood, bad locations. In other words, you have to have them in a place that has a population that will support it. And the best places are places that are walkable. All the ones in Chicago and New York that are very successful are all right there in popular places where people can walk to, or there's a lot of businesses right around them. You have both here. You have a big student population, you have a neighborhood population, you have a university, and you have businesses all concentrated in this one area, which really lends to the idea that it should be successful.
All right, then one last question. Are you aware of whether there's been any discussion or proposal specific to the Board of Advisors that you indicated is an essential component of this?
No.
Okay.
No, I think, again, that would have to be, because at some point in time, once, let's assume that the proposal gets approved and starts to build, there will be a decision made as to whether or not they want a management company that is a food service specialist come in and help run it, or do they want to do it themselves, or do they want to hire a manager to do it? There's lots of different opportunities there.
Okay, thank you very much
Sure.
for your comments. Again, this is a public hearing, and if anybody wishes to approach the microphone and make comment on this proposal, this is the time to do it.
Just wanted to make a quick suggestion as somebody from the neighborhood, and that's that if you decide to basically take action that allows this, the property to go to an RFQP, that I think you could kind of do a flash mob conversation about the RFQP with the neighborhood, with the church, with the people who are businesses downtown, with a lot of people, and it could be kind of exciting to hear different ideas of what might go into the RFQP. Because I think one of the things that's happened is RFQPs in our town have gone out before people have really had an opportunity to weigh in on them. And people in this town are smart and have really cool ideas. So that's one possibility, is just to do a sort of flash mob before the RFQP, if that's the direction you end up going in. Thank you.
And that is a suggestion to the DDA, because it's their RFQP.
But Lindsay wants to meet with you.
Gotcha. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing then at this point, and I'm going to ask staff to come forward. I'm not sure who's making the presentation. Just
Greetings. I'll try to be brief, and I don't want to reiterate most of the comments from Mr. Titus, and then I'll ask for Mr. Haywood to come up and give you some additional context. I just wanted to provide some context from the DDA. They did enter a purchase and sale agreement that ended up expiring in August, which subsequently is codified in the first letter in your packet. Just yesterday, they approved a new buy-sell agreement that would eliminate the debt that's currently serviced by the DDA. It is contingent on approvals required for this project, including the site plan today. There is a further contingency that if the council must approve either this or a modified site plan by October 30th, or that would also cancel the buy-sell agreement. So as Mr. Titus mentioned, the DDA, based on actions yesterday, did update their letter that's in your packet explaining their position, and they have authorized the applicant for a conditional rezoning, which I understand is in the works. So with that, I would ask Mr. Haywood to come up. We do have some additional conditions for your consideration if you desire to move forward with this project tonight, and we are certainly available to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a question.
Go ahead, just before you go, Tom.
Yep. Mr. Titus mentioned a letter from Project for Public Spaces. I can't find a letter from them in the file. I can find a memo from you on a phone concerning a phone call. Are we in possession of a letter from Project?
I'm not familiar with such a letter. I did participate in a phone call, and the memo that I crafted is basically my notes from that call.
Okay.
Are you familiar with an actual
Yeah,
letter?
I know there was a communication. I know they provided materials. I know we sent those materials with the letter. I honestly don't know, and I don't want to be in ELI for misstating that there was a letter or a memo or anything of that nature. There was materials provided by Project for Public Spaces, so I didn't mean to misspeak and say specifically they wrote a letter. It could have been other materials that they provided to us that we provided to you. So I apologize if that was misleading.
I remember seeing something.
Hey, can you bring some of these up on this? I guess, can you give us a detail of your memory of that phone call then?
Takes a minute.
Loading?
74 on the,
Next tab.
it's page 74 when you get to the agenda item.
It's loading.
It's a fairly big item.
Well, I could certainly start with my recollection of that call. Thank you. So certainly, Project for Public Space is a very reputable organization. They've worked on projects mostly in the public realm where they focus on placemaking, focus on strategies to activate public spaces, and they've worked on some very exciting projects. My essential recollection of that particular call is that they were in conversations with the developers. There was a lot of exciting ideas that were potentially being proposed, and they were working on some sort of engagement that would be codified in a contract that they were working on at that point. My recollection is that was in mid-August. So the developer may have some updates in terms of any progress on that contract and on their engagement with Project for Public Spaces. I'm not aware of any.
Okay, we have not been provided a copy of a contract with them.
No, we have not.
Okay. And then the letter, I guess, from the pension fund, the Canadian Pension Fund, can you just tell me your remembrance of that letter?
So my understanding is that is an email exchange where a gentleman representing a firm from Chicago who has engaged with this pension fund in Canada says essentially that they are very interested in potentially funding this project.
All right, so it's not a funding letter?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, Tom, before he calls up David? All right, thanks.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, and I want to make just a couple of comments about areas that are kind of haven't been talked about. So the first is Well, I guess I'll go into the recommendation from the Planning Commission. So they met in August, and they failed to pass a motion in support of the project on a vote of 1-7. And their primary reasons were that the market concept is not clearly developed, that the building height doesn't bring a significant benefit, that the RFP could open the project to more development potential, and the height in this location's inappropriate and not consistent with the master plan. The Transportation Commission also provided a referral. They had some concerns about the impact of additional traffic, particularly with the realignment of Albert Street that would have on Delta and Valley Court, Delta and Grand River, and all the way to Michigan. Not that those couldn't be worked out, but just that they needed to be modeled. Also, comments from the Parks team. What we haven't talked a whole lot about is the potential for the farmers market location in the former Evergreen right-of-way. That would propose, I think, 26 bays for vendors and a pavilion. So there are a lot of concerns about the long-term management and operations of such a venue. So there would be comments that we received that there would be significant operational challenges of moving the farmers market to that location. The proposed location is smaller than the current location, access by vendors, storage and proximity to the old BWL building, equity issues with covered space versus non-covered space, and that a small urban park in that location probably has more potential than inheriting something new like that. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about a couple of proposed conditions if the council were to decide to move forward with this project and approve it, that a couple of standard additional conditions of approval that have been fairly regular recently, that it would need to be hinged on a rezoning. So it would need to be conditioned that the property be rezoned to a district that would accommodate the approved development. Of course, that the city and developer enter into development agreement. And lastly, electrical vehicle charging stations, they would need a minimum of 2. Two. So with that, I would take any questions.
All right, any questions to David? Go ahead.
David, how would it work, given some of the uncertainties that we're obviously honing in on and related to this market, but if this is approved, so what happens if, because they don't have a business plan for that, they don't have a conceptual market plan, like what happens if that doesn't come to fruition? They do all that analysis, they do a business plan, they do a market study, and no such luck. It's not going to work, or it's going to be radically different. Would they then, depending on how we write these conditions, they would have to come back in for, a revised special use permit, something that would still have to fit in that square footage in the way that it was built out, because the building would likely be underway? What are the...
Well, I mean, if you wanted to hang your hat on a market concept and say that it would have to develop, into that, and if not, they would have to come back. Otherwise, it's a white box like any other development that uses come and go at that point. So if you were comfortable with that, then it would be like any other development that would transition. I know that's not what we would like to see when we approve a large-scale mixed-use development, but sometimes that is the reality of a use. The difference here is that we're going into it without it being fully developed.
Yeah, and because it is a large single space, I mean, certainly there are different, retail comes and goes, and those things change, and I think we all understand that and have those expectations, but different than sort of types of build out where you may not know the restaurants or whatever that are going in there. I mean, this is a very different concept itself, and the way the building is going to be constructed has some impact on that, although I suppose theoretically, and I'm kind of looking at the consultants, but they could subdivide that and do what they need to for retail. We would still protect the uses of commercial on the first floor regardless, depending on how we write this conditions, right? Does that mean it would have to continue to be mixed use? We could write this so that it would have to be commercial.
Yes, we could write it in that fashion. It's not currently written in that fashion, though.
Okay.
I don't think.
Okay.
It also would, pardon me, would also depend on the resulting rezoning and what standards were approved there.
Correct, right.
So if it were a conditional rezoning and that development failed, then they probably would have to come back and revert the rezoning and start over from that perspective.
Okay.
The development agreement also would hinge on saying exactly what would need to be developed, and if that didn't pan out, then they probably would have to start over.
Right. I understand that we have that sort of second bite of the apple, but I'm trying to stay focused on the special use.
So the proposal in regard to Evergreen is utilizing publicly owned space for some purpose. Is that proposed to be just a gift to the city that they're going to build a pavilion there?
Yes.
Okay, are they utilizing any other city-owned space?
No, there were proposals to include the stormwater retention and either pair that with or have it be a dual-purpose ice rink in Valley Court Park, but they've since backed away from that, and now the stormwater detention is on the site itself, so they're no longer pursuing that.
And does the proposal have any public infrastructure improvement associated with it?
Yeah, so there would be the combined sewer extension up Evergreen and also new water main. That would be part of the project, so that would extend all the way up to a point just north of Valley Court.
Okay. Any other questions of David? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're at a moment where I need a motion of some kind with regard to this.
I'll move approval of the site plan and special use permit application from HSV Park Place LLC for the properties at 314, 328, 334, and 340 Evergreen Avenue.
Is there a second?
Make a second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Motion by Councilmember Draheim, seconded by Councilmember Stevens. All right, discussion. Anybody want to say anything about this? Go ahead.
I'd like to say a few things. So, first of all, I think there are several things that I like about this project. I really like the moderate to low income. I like that you honed in particularly on sort of early career poor and the idea of trying to help folks who are not only kind of dealing with housing shortages and housing costs at sort of all stages of family life, but also for folks who are meeting some of our goals and targets to retain some of the college students who are graduating but who are often taking jobs that don't really put them in a position to rent in this region, including our Lansing area, I might add. So I really did like that, and I think that's great, and I do think that's a plus of sort of our requirements around the 25%. I certainly like the infrastructure improvements and the road alignments. I think the work that's going to be done to do that. And then I just want to say that in theory, the food hall, the indoor market, I like. I've been to many of them. I'm going to be in Grand Rapids at an event that I'm planning in a month at the Grand Rapids one. But I have very serious concerns about whether in practice that will work here. We saw one fail 2 miles from here, 3 miles from here, the Lansing one. And I know that we currently have a market, food incubator, kitchen incubator, housing expansion that is underway at Allen Street Market, and led by an incredibly energetic and wonderful woman who is still moving heaven and earth to try to get all the financing and to make that work. The Grand Rapids market, the Flint market, most of the ones in this state, at least, that I'm familiar with, are definitely public-private, and they have required public funding. They've required public funding for some of the ongoing operations of those. So I think it's not that it couldn't be done privately, and I think Project for Public Spaces is an amazing organization. If it's going to work, they're going to be it. But for me, the public benefit of this, which is what is making my decision on a special use permit, because this does require that. This is higher than what our master plan allows for, and it hinges on this, and there's just not enough there for me. I'm not confident, and so I'm worried that we're making a decision on this being a public benefit, part of this, and that if it doesn't work, we're gonna wind up with a franchised food court, which is fine, but isn't exactly a public use benefit, particularly given the pressure for franchises here in our community. So it just isn't getting me over the edge. I do worry that this is, and I'm a huge supporter of density downtown, but I do worry that the height of this building is still just a bit too tall for where it is on Evergreen. And I don't think it's compatible with our future master plan in that respect. So I'm not going to be supporting this as it is.
Okay. Anybody else with any comments? Go ahead.
I will just add that I think it's an interesting concept, but I'm still not sure what the concept is. It was an urban market for a while, and now it's a food hall. Maybe it's both. And what I don't see is a plan for making the concept work. And I haven't seen that since the beginning of the project. It's been 10 months since we've been talking about this project, and there have been some really terrific concepts floated along the way: owner-occupied condominiums, movie theater, office space, automated parking. These are all great concepts. They never made it to the planning stage, the implementation stage, and that track record concerns me. It concerns me a lot, and I think the project has some attractive features, but I'm afraid I'm not confident in the developer's ability to build this project the way it's sort of been proposed. I don't want to minimize the contributions of any of the team members to their various communities and their various industries, including East Lansing. But the lesson over the last 10 months has been that we're just not seeing the details. And I started asking in DDA subcommittee meetings, I started asking in June for evidence that this urban market concept was going to be commercially viable. And I was told that, yeah, we'll get you the evidence, we'll get you the evidence. And then in the end, we got a letter saying that a food incubator could be a really interesting thing. Well, that was a change of course. And we still don't have any evidence that the food incubator is going to be commercially viable. So this is a pattern that I can't ignore. And the bottom line is I view this proposal as incomplete because we don't know what the uses are going to be in this area, and it's a sensitive area. And I can't take that risk.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to make one comment because I think Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Draheim outlined a lot of my concerns. But if this were to fail tonight, I would give a message out to the DDA, and of course I'm happy to meet with any of those members, that an RFP process would be preferable to me as a city council member. Of course, I'm just speaking on my behalf. However, during the beginning of this very long process, I had voiced my concern about not going with an RFP originally, and if this were to fail tonight, I would like to see that revisited, possibly with a priority on reaching out to neighbors, community members, as well as priority on possibly office space or incubator space, because I do think that those are interesting concepts. So that is my comment.
Anything? Okay. Just a couple of comments also, because I think the concerns that have been expressed by Councilmember Draheim, the Mayor Pro Tem, and Councilmember Stevens sort of cover the entire category that we're looking at here. But I want to circle back to public benefit, because the issue of public benefit, I think, has circled around the idea of the food hall and what it could bring to, as a different type of thing to the downtown. And what we learned tonight is that while the School of Hospitality, and thanks to Professor Ellsworth for being here, that they're looking at a concept, not a plan. And one of the things that struck me is that while we don't ordinarily look at the retail space that's associated with a proposal, in other words, we don't say, you've got to have this or that in there. That is how this is presented to us, is that this is the public benefit that's being provided to us. According to the professor, the sweet spot is 10 to 12,000 square feet out of 23,000 square feet. So we don't have any idea what is going to be in those other square feet, but it doesn't sound like this is fleshed out enough to really constitute a public benefit. I agree, that, I'm probably not the one to say that I strictly adhere to the master plan, but we have a process that's being conducted right now that is building a new zoning approach to the downtown area, which is the form-based code that hopefully will be soon coming to us, or some future city council to spend about a year implementing. So I think that, this is the time to wait on this, and that I know that in sitting in the DDA meetings, the concern there, I think the motivation actually for approving the sale of this property is to get that debt off the books. Because 2 years from now, the amount of the payments ramp up unless there's an additional renegotiation regarding that debt. But I think an RFP that is carefully calculated, that goes out, will have at least test the waters of this market as to what this property can really bring to the city of East Lansing, and may circle back to this project. I mean, it could happen. And there's nothing that prevents this group from participating in that project, but like Councilmember Stevens, I think now is the time to do that. And there's an additional advantage with regard to that, and that additional advantage is that we will complete this construction on the west side of Abbott Road. We'll begin to see how these new buildings are functioning within the downtown area, and that will give us additional information to evaluate any future project for this particular property. So for all those reasons, and particularly for the public benefit issue that Councilmember Draheim brought up, I'll also be voting no on this. So unless there's more comments, there is a main motion. All in favor of that main motion indicate by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. Aye. The motion fails. All right, we move to the next item on our agenda, which I got to find my agenda now. Somewhere here. There we go. No, it's right here. The next item on our agenda is item 4.2, consideration of an application from GTW Investment Properties LLC for site plan and special use permit approval for the properties at 215 and 217 River Street. The applicant is requesting approval of a 4-story sorority to house 44 people. The subject properties are located in the EV East Village zoning district. This is a public hearing. If anybody in the audience wishes to address council with regard to item number 4.2, please step to the microphone at this time.
Good evening. My name is Joe Goodser. I'm representing GTW. Excuse me. After going through the Plan Commission with a unanimous approval vote and no public objection to the project, I guess I was kind of surprised to read in the agenda that there was a question of being asked of Tom Yaden his legal opinion of whether a condition of approval could be based on no alcohol possessed or consumed on the project. I guess my first thought was, how is this going to affect East Village? How is it going to affect future redevelopment? Is this something that is going to be part of other projects that we may have in the area that no alcohol is able to be on premise or consumed, whether it's my project or someone else's. We do have additional plans for things we want to do in this area, so I guess that's a question that I hope to get answered this evening. Second question, I guess, is as a property owner, how am I supposed to monitor and on a daily basis whether someone's consuming alcohol or in possession of alcohol in their private residence? You know, how do I monitor that on a daily basis? How do I tell someone who's of the legal drinking age that they can't drink in the room? So those are some questions I have after reading tonight's packet that I hopefully you guys can, as a council, can address. So that's the first thing I have concern about. I think that question has come up about consuming and possession of alcohol because we plan this to be a sorority, and the question has been raised, what happens if it isn't a sorority in the future and it becomes a fraternity, then what? Well, I just want to, I guess, remind the council that, you know, as a fraternity in this community, they're probably one of the groups on campus or part of campus, the MSU Life, that has more oversight than any other group, or any of its members have more oversight than any other members do in other groups. You have MSU, you have the Internal Fraternal Council of the fraternities, you have the national chapter, you have the local alumni board, you have Community Resource Management as the management company of the property, and we have a lease with special provisions that address fraternity and their activities. You have the parents guaranteeing the lease, and you also have, last, the East Lansing Police Department that would monitor that situation if this did go from a sorority to a fraternity. So I just want to share those thoughts with you. The other question that came up in the packet that I read was the question about the second story. It's actually a third story balcony. And I guess that was somewhat of surprise because according to the ordinance, the building has to have a step back feature. So with the step back feature, it naturally creates this patio area, and also in the ordinance itself, it encourages second story buildings to have setbacks a minimum of 4 feet to allow for open air patios, increased lighting, and air to ground levels. So it's something that's encouraged in the audience, in the ordinance, excuse me. So I'm surprised that if the ordinance is set for this area and I build a building that is consistent with the ordinance, why now is that a problem? So I'd like to kind of get some ideas on that. Second, the proposed balcony is 5 feet by 50 feet, not a huge area. It's nowhere near the size of the recent patios and terraces that have been built in these new buildings. Obviously, we have the hub right around the corner that has a 10-story building with a rooftop patio that has barbecue, basketball courts, volleyball courts, you know, all those types of activities on a 10-story building. The Landmark has a similar type terrace on the second story. The rooftop, the Abbott that's currently being built is going to also have a terrace. So I'm kind of curious if those buildings that have already been approved kind of meet this type of code. Why is the building that I'm building not appropriate if these other things have been approved to that extent? And I guess, you know, one of my last comments is, and I've addressed this with the mayor previously, is that whether you know it or not, in this market, there's a tremendous shortage of fraternity houses. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of fraternity houses popping up in buildings that aren't designed to be fraternities. There's a need for that. Where does the council, as a developer, I'd like to know, another question that I have is, as a developer, if there's a shortage of this, where can we develop these buildings to meet the proper safety, health, and well-being of the tenants in buildings that are designed for that type of use, instead of in some of the buildings that the fraternity houses are finding their way into? So I'd like to get some direction on what the council's thought is on where this area would be and what would that look like, because it seems to me that East Village, based on no public objection when we went through the planning commission, it's predominantly a student area, would be a perfect place for if this building did become a fraternity house.
Councilmember Stevens.
So I just wanted to point out my own opinion on this, and I agree with you on the alcohol provision, as well as actually the balcony provision. But I did want to ask a clarifying question. So I'm part of the celebrations committee. It's a joint committee between Michigan State, some landlords in the area, as well as the city of East Lansing. And I had got an indication from some of the fraternity and sorority lives that they already have a ban currently on hard alcohol on the premises of fraternity and sororities. Is that true?
That is my understanding. I just learned of that when I started asking a number of questions when this pact came out. So as a fraternity or sorority, whoever goes in here, they would have to follow those type of guidelines.
Okay.
There'd
Thank
be
you.
a violation of it. But I did hear that just beer and wine and hard alcohol has been eliminated from any activities in fraternity houses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a
Okay.
question. This second story area that's 5 by 50, what is the access to that area?
It's down a hallway through a door.
So there is a door to that area?
Correct.
Okay. And do you have a feeling that you actually need to have a door to this area? Is it designed to be a patio of some kind?
Well, again, that's what the ordinance suggested and kind of gave us with that required step back to the building, and just naturally created that. And also in the ordinance, it suggests that we have that type of outdoor space, so that's why we did it.
Okay, I don't know if the ordinance, I guess from my standpoint, I know that the ordinance suggests that you have to do that. I'm asking if that's important to you in terms of your site plan, actually having access to that. I'm not saying that somebody can't climb through a window and get out there and things like that. I'm not talking about that. I mean, encouraging the use of that as a patio area. There are no balconies with regard to the hub. And part of the reason that was done was because our history of balconies in that area has not been a good history. Okay. And so that's why I think these questions have been directed towards this issue. And so my question to you is just simply, can you turn a doorway into a window instead so that the light from that enters into the building, but access is clearly not encouraged, let me put it that way.
Sure, we can definitely do that. That
Okay.
could be changed.
A follow-up question
Yes.
to that. I'm looking at the elevation, and I guess I'm wondering whether you could turn that balcony into a porch roof. A porch roof. So basically not set it up as a balcony and just have the colonnades and the roof and everything that's already there, but now it's not a balcony that's meant for people to use, but it's just a roof.
Yes.
You could do that. Is that the answer from
He's
back there?
architect, so.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
well, I think that answers any issue that I have, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask the follow-up question. I mean, is the intended, because, I differ from my colleagues. I think there is an intended use for people to use it, and I think sometimes that can be a nice thing. I've lived in large houses like this where, we clustered on a tiny pitch of gravel in the back to get some sun on the very random sunny days. And so, I think it's great if you guys can accommodate whatever, and I think that's good for us to know for our discussion. But if the intention is, I guess if people are going to use this, I'd rather have it look like this and have a railing around it than having people climb out a window and get on the roof, which people do all over the place in this town come spring. So that would be my take on it. I think if it's a common doorway like this, it has a different feeling than sort of small balconies. And if it's a sorority house, and there are other restrictions you can put on that in terms of, fires and barbecues and all sorts of other things that I'm sure you as a landlord would do. But I would rather have it be a safe space if people really are going to use it.
Go ahead.
Just to add on to that, I understand the concerns completely. I just, for me, I feel like in, these cases, they're going to find a way, if that's an outlying roof, they're going to find a way to get on it regardless, and I would probably just rather have it be a safe space in that scenario. So I didn't expand originally on why I was okay with the balcony, but I think Councilmember Draheim outlined that fairly well, and my opinion is consistent with it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Can I ask you another question? Sure. Do you generally, when you're leasing for sororities, maybe and/or fraternities, do you require them to have a house parent or a house manager on site living?
Well, the
at-
sororities all have house mothers, and there's
Correct.
a suite built for that.
There is a suite built for that.
Mhm.
Okay.
And you know, one of the things when I talked about some of the oversight, I can tell you that in some of our current buildings, we have provisions where there are second-story balconies, and if there's a problem, those balconies get taken away. And I know that the building, the house, the Hopcat has the same type of thing. If you have that slider door open, there's any type of problem, the slider door gets eliminated from being able to be used, and we have that same type of practice. So if there was any type of problem in the future with that, it would just be something that would be eliminated from the tenants using that. Yes.
Go ahead.
How tall is that railing that's on the balcony being proposed right now?
42 inches.
Okay.
All right, I wish we actually had somebody from the fraternity and sorority council here tonight, because my memory is that sororities are not allowed to have parties on site. Is that correct? Yeah. Anybody know? I got a thumbs up from Mesa back there, so they can't have parties on site anyway, so.
We asked Sue Webster, the liaison from the university, that same question, and she said her understanding was all the sororities were prohibited by their charters from having alcohol on site. So I guess in some way, I want to just, if I could, Your Honor, just speak to the issue quickly, is that in particular on Rivers and Water's Edge, this is a picture from last winter of 1,000 people collected at the end of Rivers and Water's Edge, which is on this block. And you can see the balconies are full. And you can see that this perpetuates a big challenge for our law enforcement professionals. So I'll put the picture here. So if council were to elect to not have alcohol, and this was a sorority, then perhaps a balcony would not be as objectionable to the police, and we can have the chief come up and speak about it. But if it could be a fraternity, which means alcohol is permitted, then perhaps not having a balcony would be an extra precaution against perpetuating this type of behavior right on River Street and Water's Edge, which is ground zero for celebratory events. And I think that we would all acknowledge that the balcony's there. You probably wouldn't have done that again if we had a chance to have that one back, but that was 30 years ago when that was done. So, but the chief is certainly available to speak about his concerns about balconies in this area in particular, but it seems like one or the other might satisfy the police issue and our issue of concern, but it depends how council wants to proceed with that.
Okay, is there any other questions, Mr. Goodsir, though? All right, thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So, is the chief coming up, or are we having, why don't we bring the chief up and to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. The issue we've had in this area is well depicted in the photograph you just showed there. Basically what we have is it turns into a theater setting certain times of the year. We have large crowds. We have people that are intoxicated at an elevated setting. It's usually not a good thing. We've had people fall previously, been hurt pretty bad. We've also had objects thrown. And for all those reasons, public safety reasons, we would ask you to take that into consideration.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, go ahead.
You know what, I actually don't have a question for the chief, I just had a comment.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
You want to make a comment now, or you want to wait till staff makes their presentation?
I'll wait until staff.
Okay. Okay, who's up?
Thank you.
Well,
So,
strike that. I want to offer to the public again an opportunity to address council on this issue. So we do have somebody out there. Okay, step up.
Ken Jones of Studio Intrigue Architects. I'm the architect for the project. And I would like to just point out a few things. While I understand the concern with the balconies, your ordinance really puts an undue burden on a developer to actually have increased construction costs to create the jog in the building that is required by the ordinance. So you're requiring a platform there, which some of you are now suggesting that maybe we want to have a railing around that. So in the event that somebody goes out there on a platform that we're required to create and spend additional money to create is now safer. Well, it seems like we're now adding more expense onto the developer to create a railing around something that you don't want to encourage people to be on, but by virtue of having a railing around it, you're suggesting that it should be occupied. And I guess I have a few things, with that. It just seems like your ordinance might want to be changed to eliminate that setback, because from a construction standpoint, that setback is actually fairly expensive to construct for no real purpose, no occupiable purpose in a building.
All right, let me ask you a question. You
Sure.
have interpreted the installation of a porch as meeting the step back requirement?
No. If you look at the far left side of that rendering there, if you follow the corner of the building up past the second floor, it steps. So that is the required step back.
So part of that porch is in the
Extends back
step
a little bit more
Okay,
further,
gotcha.
correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
And that's, what's the width of it?
Yeah, I have a first.
Sure.
So 42 inches.
Yeah.
If you notice the other balconies that are in the Cedar Village area, they are a little bit higher than that. Do you think it would be an undue burden on the developer to have that height increased of that railing?
No, aesthetically, it might look a little strange because
Sure.
the other ones are a little taller.
No, I understand that,
But
and-
yes, yeah, the building code requires 42 inches, so that's what's provided right now.
Yeah,
is the
and
basic
I
minimum.
understand that completely, and I
Yep.
know it might look a little bit off, but the truth is, the chief brought it up, but it does happen.
Yeah.
42 inches is, even for me as a short guy, I could tip over that.
Sure,
So,
understand.
Sorry, I was just gonna, and you may know it, it could be a question for Steph, but remind me again what that setback is. Is it, that's not, it's from that drawing. I was thinking it was 4 feet, but is it?
It's 4 feet.
It is 4
Yes.
feet, okay.
The step back is 4 feet.
Yep.
So how can that be 5 feet in that drawing? The depth is 5 by 50, and there'd be a 4-foot step
Yeah, that's
back
fine.
in
Let's
that
try to
drawing.
know.
Yep. The 5 feet came from, I think, staff's report. I believe it is further than 5 feet, because you're correct. We have a small porch there plus the 4-foot setback.
Okay, so do you know the actual size of that balcony then?
I don't without looking it up real quick.
Go ahead.
Do you need the Terra effect? Do you need the columns?
The columns right now are built to the build-to line of the property, which is also required by ordinance. So otherwise, we would need to really take the entire building and push it up towards the road. So this kind of softens that effect a little bit of, River Street is not a wide road. So this does push the body of the building back a little bit while suggesting a build-to line of a building up front.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you very much. All right, again, is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address council on this item? And I'll close the public hearing. Staff, report to us on this.
So we had a chance to look at the renderings a little bit. I want to take you take you to the site plan real quick. We can talk about maybe that'll show the step back dimension. Ken, do you want to look up that dimension for the balcony? Okay, so here's our site plan. So the proposal, I don't know if we actually covered the proposal details, but it's a 4-story building plus a basement. It's designed for 44 persons, including a house mother, and single and double occupancy rooms. And the basement level and the first floor are common elements for the development. Parking for 16, 22 is required, so they'll be required to get a variance or off-site a shared agreement. They're providing bicycles for 54. I think they have 26 or 27 outside and the remainder inside. Proposing to tear down, there are currently 2 single-family homes on 2 different parcels on this property. They're proposing to tear those down and construct this development. And a special use permit is required for Class B multifamily developments. And we use the term Class B multifamily developments going back to kind of the beginning of the discussion tonight, that's really what we're approving here tonight is a special use permit for that type of multiple family housing. Since we can't discriminate or require special standards for different genders, we have to make the assumption that this could either be a sorority or a fraternity as it's shown to be designed without really any special change or requirement from the city. So it could, not saying that it would happen easily or quickly, but things do happen and it could change in the future. So that's why we kind of view it from the perspective of it could be everything from a sorority to a rooming house or a fraternity. So we have to make those assumptions about the behaviors and the issues that may come with any one of those developments. Planning Commission recommended approval. They did so unanimously. And the DDA similarly recommended unanimous support, although they did also note the concern for the balcony. So there are a few other additional conditions that staff would recommend after much of this discussion and all of these facets was being held in the background preparation for this meeting. We already mentioned the city attorney's recommendation for no use or possession of alcohol on the site. That would have to be added if council wanted to pursue that. Prohibition of the balcony, either completely removing it or making it a more decorative element or functionally a decorative element. They would need a variance for the parking. As I mentioned earlier, the parking variance is required in 2 ways. One is a setback at the rear, and then also the count provided. And then I guess that concludes those items. So I would take any questions.
Go ahead.
So, when I'm looking at the plans and we're looking at the elevation, we're obviously kind of all struggling. That setback is 4 feet, but help me see what I'm looking at on here, because I can see the balcony, so I'm seeing the columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe, kind of right outside. Yep.
Right there.
And so that's the balcony, and then
Let me
there's.
see if I can go to a different. What page am I on?
I'm going to follow along because my eyes can only
Can't
see this
what
close
page
to me.
I'm on.
Page what? There we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, okay. There's
So
a
here we
side
see it.
elevation there, right there. Okay, there we go.
So here we see
Okay.
4 feet there.
It's like 11 feet. 11 foot, yeah.
So
The
it's
depth-
11
the
feet
depth of
by
the
50
patio is
feet.
11. Okay.
It's a huge balcony.
It's a huge balcony.
And can you help me understand the build-to line the architect mentioned, and maybe they need to come back up, but he mentioned that, no, you can go back up to what you were just at, actually. So the columns are the build-to line, his description of sort of that softening it, so the build-to line's there, it's not kind of like right
Yeah,
at
I
the
was going
street.
to actually go to the site plan that would be
Okay.
able to show that a little better.
Okay.
Oh, this doesn't have a zoom function. I believe the build-to line is the face of the columns. That's correct. So
Yeah,
the build-to
sorry.
line, is the face of that balcony.
So is one option just to take the railing off the balcony off and just have a sloped roof there? A sloped overhang?
certainly an option. I suppose just making the door a window and having it look like, or having a non-functional door, so it looked like a balcony but didn't function like one.
You ever
But
been to
I'm just-
college?
Well, and there are ways to do that, I suppose, but.
None of us have ever sat on a roof line
Never.
while we were in college, so.
I've never
just
sat
went-
on I've never sat on a really pitched one, is what I was thinking.
Well, you couldn't, because you'd have fallen off.
That's
but
what I
the-
was thinking.
I got a question for the city attorney, if I can. Are we, would it be permissible for us to say something like this? The project shall be occupied as a sorority house unless an application for an alternative use is approved by an SUP amendment, or through an SUP amendment to this special use permit.
I have concerns about something like that because you're specifying gender, and our anti-discrimination laws might come into play on that, and if that portion may be stricken as invalid, and then you're left without the restrictions.
Protection, okay. Because I think that would take care of, all these issues, but, go ahead.
I guess I would just, from where I'm at, I would rather deal with the physical issue where we have a concern about the safety of students. I am utterly opposed to a window with something that looks like a deck, because I think we'll just use it as that, and it'll just be even more dangerous. So if we don't like that, I'd like to figure out the way to deal with that. I'm not in favor of trying to restrict the alcohol. I think while there are condo association rules and other things that restrict tenant behaviors and rules, I think on a practical basis, this will be incredibly hard to implement and oversee, and I'm not sure it feels even fair. I would rather deal with what we think the issue is, and that's safety.
So what's your idea for that?
I think we just have to get rid of the patio. I think if we have it step back and there's something decorative, I mean, that's a 4-foot, I'm not an architect, so I don't know, he's probably like, but I don't know, if there's something we can do that makes that step back just either be just a step back in the building with no anything, or it's a more decorative, it's a 4-foot, just ledge with the columns, but it's, I think to me, the signal to a student, if there's a narrow 4,
I have to disagree. You're looking at like if it's 4 feet,
if it's 2 feet,
they're still going to be out there.
Yeah.
I mean that in a completely practical sense rather than a policy stance. I just, which is
disagree.
why my comment on, the height of that railing, it's having any kind of setback. I think the concern was valid on the setback in general, because I think if we have any kind of setback there, whether it's railing, whether it's 4 feet or 9 feet, if you have any windows nearby it, they're going to find a way onto it. If you have windows on the other side of the building, they're going to find a way onto it. So,
Mr. Lahannis.
We had a similar issue come up with a renovation to a fraternity on Grand River, and they simply wanted to put a balcony here and have access.
And every time
And
you're
it was
walking
left-
by it.
It was without one, but I think it was an improvement doing it this way, because it would create much more of a stadium atmosphere. So you just have an element of a roof, but there's not an inviting balcony with railings, which would have even more people up there. So this issue had been handled before.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
And it's, and if, these things, elements become overloaded in college towns, and you could have, instead of having 50 people up there, you could have 150 people up there, and you could have these things have collapses, and they're not necessarily safe elements. So I think that this was the better way of handling this solution back then, and I still think it is when I go by there on game day, that it was the better solution to not invite people to be up there creating that stadium atmosphere.
So explain again how that was dealt with.
So this was proposed to actually have, just like this one, a railing and access and be a full-on balcony. And council approved it and said, take the railing off and don't make it a balcony. And that's the way it was handled. So it would look similar to this, except it wouldn't be a balcony and there wouldn't be access, and people shouldn't be occupying the space. And if people were occupying the space, perhaps the police could say, you shouldn't be occupying that space, it's not habitable space, you should come down from there. And frequently, when the police invite someone to come down from a roof, the people typically listen and come down. Though, we did propose at one point a no roof sitting ordinance, which did not pass. which was, I thought, a fine solution.
And I agree with it not passing.
Yeah.
But maybe that is the simple thing. I mean, we're never going to, we're not trying to regulate student activity, so to speak. We're trying to create spaces that would maybe produce a little different activity. Go ahead, Ruth.
Is it appropriate to ask the developer if a sloped roof with no railing could be put there without disrupting the project?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly okay to ask the
Can we
developer
ask
that.
them?
Or the architect,
Or
probably
whomever,
even better.
whomever.
but-
Okay, so we definitely could do a sloped roof. The problem is, as you've seen, and I've had the experience of in East Lansing, they tend to get out on the slope of roof, a flat roof. Doesn't really matter. If it's warm out, they want to be outside. One of the suggestions that may solve a lot of the problems is not require that setback to start with, so that the building would just be straight up and not step back as suggested in the ordinance.
It's not the step back that's causing the problem. Your problem is the build-to line. That's why you have those columns there.
Okay.
Well, I think it's two problems, because we also have a setback at the second, above the second level that's
Right.
required. So there is a 4-foot change there that is required right now by ordinance.
Right.
So even if we take off our porch, we will still have a 4-foot ledge there with no railing on it, no nothing. So what Joe is suggesting is that, and your ordinance allows this by 3/4 vote of the council, to amend that to remove that requirement of having that step back. Then we would have a flush facade. We would have nothing for anybody to be on.
What would you do with the build-to requirement?
We would still create, maybe, I'm not sure yet. Quite honestly, I don't know if I would take your suggestion that of maybe a sloped roof, which could help. We could.
Can you
push
bring
the-
up that?
We could push the building up
Elevation again?
to the sidewalk. But it is, it's a narrow road, but we could push the building up, and that would take care of that issue.
Can we,
Yeah, just a minute, let's get the elevation up here. I just want to ask a question with regard to that,
I was going to ask you.
if we can find it. There we go. So if we, I'll ask Tom first. If we have a 3/4 vote, we can eliminate the requirement of the step back in this design?
And I haven't looked at that provision recently, so I'd have to take a moment to look that
I
up.
want to know whether we can do that, number one. But then I want to ask a specific question about this, because you wouldn't necessarily have to eliminate your front porch with the columns. You would just run the building up above that, and it would be an enclosed space.
Correct.
with
We could do that,
where
too.
people could actually live, so to
Correct.
speak.
We could
Okay.
do that as well. And
I don't have a problem with
I don't
that
understand
personally.
what you just said.
You're shifting the build-to line where the
So
columns are.
if we bring the build-to line out
Ah.
over the porch,
Right.
so that, it squares out over there, you've added 11 feet of brickwork on the front, on the top of that, and there's really no porch up there. It's just an area where people can live.
It just
you know?
creates sort of a step back because you're bringing something forward.
Well, you've got
Correct.
step backs on the side, so to speak, but you're still bringing everything forward there.
Right, we could bring the sides forward to the wall that's below them, not all the way out to the porch line. So the front of the building just has a jog at the porch, and there's livable space above the porch that's
Above the
interior
porch.
space.
And you still have that portico above the
Correct.
top.
Yep,
I
we'd
mean, it's
probably
going to
change
look
the
sort of
portion
the
of it.
same, it just won't
Correct.
have a balcony.
Yep, let's do that.
And I got to find out whether we can do that, actually.
It
It
is.
sounds
here.
like you can do it easily.
Yeah, it is here, it's, go ahead.
You can share it.
Ken's right, that requirement for that 4-foot step back after the second floor can be waived by 3/4 votes of council.
Okay, so we don't know whether we have that, but if we do that, do we have to, what condition would we have to put on this to, I assume the construction plan is going to reflect this, but are we increasing the number of people who will be living in the building? No. You would just redesign that to some kind of common space for them?
Right,
Is that
the
it?
bedrooms get a little larger, probably.
All right. Yeah, I'm good with it, so.
So just to clarify, we wouldn't have to put any provision that that's how they would occupy the space?
Right.
Okay.
Because the plan itself says the number of bedrooms, and so as long as they're not
Right.
changing that, then.
So how do you make your amendment here, Mr. Mayor?
I'm looking for advice here as
I'm still
to
looking
how we
for
do
that.
it. Because I think all the other, and I'll ask David that, all the other conditions that were recommended for this would stay the same, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So can I just sum up
Yep.
where we are? So I'm certainly interested in pursuing this option of removing the step back. I think the safety issue is real, and I would like to address it. So I would like to not have balconies on this building. And I appreciate the comments from the developer, because I think he's pointed out a problem with the code that was maybe designed for a different demographic in that area, but we're facing the realities of the demographic that is there now. So I think it sounds like what we need is two functional things. One is to prohibit the balcony, and one is to allow the waiver, right?
Right.
And what I might suggest is that we move to defer this until later in the agenda and ask the city attorney to draft language that would do that, unless you would like to do it.
No, I'm good with that. We would just, unless Tom has some language that's available right now so that we can move on from this. I assume it would be another condition that just simply said we waive the setback requirement and require a redesign of the building to eliminate the balcony.
I think the waiver of the setback requirement should be done at a separate motion, once there's a motion to approve the site plan, and I don't recall if that's been made yet.
No, it hasn't.
But, and then make it a condition that that there be no balcony on the premises, but then move to remove the condition as a separate motion.
Before you make such motion, can I just ask both planning staff and the city attorney, if you feel like you need a few minutes, I'm happy to make a motion to defer this to move this and have this become item 4.7, or to defer it until after item 4.6 if you feel like it would make sense. Does planning staff feel like what we're talking about makes sense, that you're okay? And city attorney, you're okay? Okay. Okay, I'm fine. I don't want to rush and have sloppy language if we're not.
I would hate to have midnight come and I have to finish.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Let me ask a question. So would this accomplish this? The procedure would be to get a main motion on the table, a move to eliminate the setback requirement for this building, and then add a condition that required them to redesign the project to eliminate the balcony area.
And setback.
And setback.
And we're calling it a setback or a step back?
What's the ordinance say,
Determine that.
David? The architect knows.
Setback.
Setback? Okay. All right.
I'll move approval of an application from GTW Investment Properties LLC for site plan and special use permit approval for the properties at 215 and 217 River Street. The applicant for a 4-story sorority to house 44 people.
Second.
Subject to
The conditions outlined, or the conditions included in the agenda item report from this evening.
Okay, and you seconded that. Okay, moved by Councilmember Draheim, seconded by Councilmember Stevens. There is now a main motion on the table. Is there another motion regarding this, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
I move to waive the requirement for the setback as required by the ordinance, as provided for in the ordinance.
Okay.
Second.
And it's been moved by the Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Stevens to waive the setback requirement as required in the ordinance. We'll take a vote on that amendment, at this point in time. All those in favor of that amendment indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes with a 4/5 majority. And then is there I'll move an additional condition, item 17, condition 17, that requires the applicant to redesign the project to eliminate the balcony area and setback.
Second.
It's been moved by me, seconded by Councilmember Stevens. I think go ahead.
Well, that condition, do we need language in there, Tom, that's sort of, I mean, I guess it's in the building plans or whatever, so we don't need anything about staff approval or anything like that?
I think that's sufficient.
Okay.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. The next are there any other amendments to the main motion? All right.
I'm noticing staff is nodding their head about
Yes,
something, so I have
so
a
I just
question for
wanted
staff.
to, yeah, sorry, I just wanted to remind you that there was still the other conditions that we needed to do if you were still interested, the no possession or use of alcohol, if you wanted to go down that track, the parking variances as well for the rear yard and the number of required.
I thought that was already in here as a condition, that they had to get a variance on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
14.
14,
14.
it's already in there.
Okay.
But the
That was
alcohol
easy.
is not, we would have to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, but I just,
Making that motion. So, all right, we're back to the main motion. Any other amendments? All right, all in favor of the main motion as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
Wait.
Are you good?
Just 1 second. So I think that variance is for the setback only, but not the number of spaces provided. I'm trying to bring it up here myself.
it does say the rear yard's parking setback, you're right.
So what are you looking for a parking variance?
So they would need, they would either need approval for off-premise parking or receive a parking variance for the parking deficiency. So they've provided 16, but they're required to have 22. So they either need an off-site agreement to use, provide parking somewhere else for those 6 spaces, or get a variance.
And is a variance just a majority vote?
We've provided the 6 spaces outside.
You have already,
But we need an agreement.
Okay, you have the letter, right? Signed letter agreement.
Well, we need a legal agreement to do that.
I will move to add condition number now 18, that the developer will provide the 6 off-site parking spaces as required by our ordinance.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that?
I'd like to just ask the developer about this.
Yeah, right. My understanding is I need either a parking variance
Mhm.
or I need 6 spaces off-site.
Correct.
Okay, so I can still go and get a variance if the ZBA approves that and not have to have 6 spots off-site, correct?
Not the way that condition was.
Help me write the conditions so that we can make it that way, Tom.
Allow an alternate.
That the
Allow
condition of the
alternate means-
special use permit be that he provide a written agreement to have the 6 off-site spaces or get a variance for the same.
Okay, I'd like to amend my motion to have condition number 18 read, developer, can you tell me what you just said again, Tom, sorry?
Shall provide
Shall provide
6 off-site
parking
spaces.
spaces
Or
or
obtain a variance for
obtain a
the
variance
same.
for alternate parking.
Okay, that's a friendly amendment.
Yes.
So it's a motion by Councilmember Draham, seconded by Councilmember Byer. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we're back to the main motion as amended again. And are there any other amendments? Okay, I'm not seeing anything out there either. All right, then, any further discussion? All in favor of the main motion as amended, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Now, we need to take a 5-minute break at this point in time, so we'll be back in 5 minutes. George asked every 2 hours.
Can we get that sorority to bring us some alcohol?
We're going to get going again. Hopefully that was all of 5 minutes. The next item on our agenda is item 4.3, which is consideration of a site plan and special use permit application from Northern United Brewing Company LLC to establish a brewery, winery, distillery, and artisan pizza restaurant at 218 Albert Avenue. The subject property is located in the B3 City Center Commercial District. This is a public hearing. So if anybody in the audience wishes to address council with regard to this item, please step up to the microphone right now. Welcome.
I'll be brief and hopefully not as provocative as the rest of the agenda items so far, but I'm Tony Grant. I'm a CEO and work in the brewery for Jolly Pumpkin Artisan Ales down Dexter. Very brief, just very excited for the opportunity. I'm here to answer any questions, address any concerns about the store, the space, our company, or how we handle our business with the concepts and our history track record. Just to note too, very excited to be coming back to East Lansing too as a former student, football player, graduate student, and when I was in my early 20s, started to become a student landlord too in the house I lived in, and I've kept that going too. So I'm very connected to the city. This was a huge deal for me personally. All of my partners are University of Michigan graduates, so, but they're all really excited. We're all very excited to be here, so thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Did you bring samples?
I tried.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, anybody else in the audience who wishes to address council on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Staff is David. All right.
Right now, look at that, good timing.
Just in time.
Just in time. I planned it that way. Okay, so this is a special use permit required for restaurants selling alcohol. This is for the Jolly Pumpkin, which is a microbrewery, which they are going after a microbrewer's license, which allows them to do something a little bit different than the typical Class C license, where they can brew on site. They can serve alcohol for consumption on site. They can even package for off-site consumption, which they are proposing to do in all of those categories. They're proposing to carry beer, wine, and spirits, and I believe manufacture all of those on site to some extent. So their restaurant side, they are proposing a full menu, including appetizers, salads, sandwiches, and desserts, and artisan pizza. This is the facility located in the recently constructed Newman Building, part of the Center City project, at the very east end of the development on Albert Street. They are proposing a total of 231 spaces for seating for 231 inside and 36 outside in the public right-of-way on the sidewalk of Albert. The seating on the inside is split between two levels, 143 seats on the first floor and 88 in a mezzanine. Their hours of operation are proposed to be 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. weekdays and 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Friday and Saturday. They will have food available until close, and Planning Commission recommendation was unanimous in support, and the DDA was also unanimous in support. With that, I would take any questions.
Okay, questions? I've got a couple. Go ahead. There's two items here on the conditions. The outdoor service area will be vacated by midnight on a daily basis. Is this consistent with, I know that a new policy had been established by the DDA. Is this consistent with that policy?
That is a good question.
So the DDA has made recommendations to the council regarding allowing outdoor service to cease at 2 a.m. That is not a policy of the DDA, though. It's a recommendation to the council that has yet to be agendized for your consideration.
All right, well, I'm satisfied with this condition. And then item number 13, no live or recorded music or telecommunication device shall be provided in the outdoor service area which is audible from any adjacent residential property. This is at the bottom of a 91-unit senior apartment building. It just seems to me to be that that's just not going to be possible if there is outdoor music. So was there any discussion of that at the Planning Commission?
I don't remember that issue coming up, whether they were proposing any outdoor entertainment of any sort. I think we have a representative from the Jolly Pumpkin here. You could probably comment more on what their plans are for their outdoor seating area.
That's fine if they want to step up, so.
Yeah, for outdoor seating would be primarily for dining. There's no plans for any entertainment. I think if that's what it's referring to.
So
No.
So if we had a provision here that just said, no live or recorded music or telecommunication device shall be provided in the outdoor service area, you'd be okay with that?
You might have
Wish my partners were here. The only thing I wouldn't know is if there's any kind of ambient kind of background music that might be, especially as it pertains to if a window's open or a door is open that could be coming out from outside. But
That's apparently not actually prohibited by this, so.
The only thing in some of our locations, sorry, not to not understand exactly what it would be, but we do use like a Sonos system in a lot of our locations to have music playing. It's part of the atmosphere. I wouldn't anticipate that anything that would be so loud that it would be, our locations are not loud. They're family environments. There's kids, there's people having conversations. It's not meant to be overwhelming. So there could be, I just can't state matter-of-factly, and I apologize if there would be no music whatsoever being played. I do not anticipate, we didn't create space for any kind of live music being played. It would be something like a Bluetooth speaker that would just be part of the music that's the entire space.
Okay, but
If that makes sense. Sorry.
That is my question then, because that is still being provided in the outdoor area if there are speakers out there that are playing music. So that is my question.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there will be. I just wouldn't want to say absolutely not if I'm the finance guy, not necessarily the environment
Gotcha.
ambiance guy, if you can understand. Sorry. But I can come back with an answer for that if that's a really big issue.
Well, I think we want to take care of this tonight. That's the
Okay.
reason. Go ahead.
I have a question for planning staff. If they were going to do, so, I mean, this says live, I think we could do two different things, either no live music shall be provided, but wouldn't they be required, I mean, we already have a condition about an entertainment license, an entertainment permit. If they were going to do live music, they'd have to come back for an entertainment permit
Yes.
anyway, wouldn't they? Okay.
And they're not getting that now.
Correct.
Correct. So item number 7 would basically say, if they were going to come back for any kind of live music, inside or outside, they'd have to come back for that.
Okay, but I'm not just
No, I
referring to
know,
live
I'm just
music.
saying, so for the live, for the live part of it, but I think we need, I mean, I'll just speak for myself, I'm not going to support a change that doesn't allow some modest speaker music outside, I think.
Well, right now it says no live or recorded music that can be heard from another apartment. That's the condition.
Which is audible from any adjacent residential property.
Go ahead, Eric.
What, is this condition present in the SUP for Hopcat?
I'm sure it is.
I think it is. Yeah.
So this condition is present in virtually every SUP for outdoor seating.
So my inclination is to just leave it. And it's complaint driven, right? And if there are no complaints, then it's fine. And if there are problems, then there's something in there that can take care of it.
Okay. Yeah, because then it would be a violation of the SUP. So we would have, multiple ways of dealing with it. Okay. Okay, those were my only 2 questions. You had something?
No.
No? Okay, go ahead.
I will make a motion to approve the site plan and special use permit application from Northern United Brewing Company, LLC, to establish a brewery, winery, distillery, and artisan pizza restaurant at 218 Albert Avenue. The subject property is located in, B3, all right. And that is subject to the 16 outlined requirements given in the October 3rd memo to the City Council via the Planning Commission.
Go ahead.
No, you beat her.
Well, but
Ruth beat me.
But she doesn't have very many seconds left in her.
Oh, yeah, good point. Okay, that was a motion made by Councilmember Stevens, seconded by Councilmember Draheim. All right, any amendments to the main motion? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next, and welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
If I could, I did get confirmation there won't be any music being played out, it would just be by the front door and that's it. So-
Gotcha. All right, the next item on our agenda is item 4.4, consideration of a special use permit application from Target Corporation for the property at 201 East Grand River to allow the sale of packaged beer, wine, and spirits for off-premise consumption. The subject property is located in the B3 City Center Commercial District. This is a public hearing, and if anybody wishes to address council with regard to this, please step up to the microphone.
I don't have an opinion on this. I just want to point out that the application was for beer and wine,
Okay.
not for liquor.
Beer, wine, and spirits.
Yeah, if you look at the application, it actually says beer and wine. It doesn't say.
Does it say beer, wine? Maybe staff can address that issue, since it says spirits here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that may be what's on their application, but it's clear that they have that on their shelf and they intend to pursue that as a sales item.
Okay, but on their application to us, they only have beer and wine?
I think that might be true.
Yep. Upscale discount packaged beer and wine for purchase for off-premise.
That's the only application they have pending in front of us.
Yeah, give me just a second. Track that down. It's right here.
I've been pointing this out for weeks. I'm not playing gotcha.
All right, let it be, in the meantime, is there anybody else who wishes to address council on this? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing now. Go ahead, step up.
Good evening, Mayor, Meadows, members of the council. My name is Michael Brown, a law firm of Carl and Edwards Brown, here to represent Target Corporation on this matter today.
Yeah, my name is Katie Stewart. I'm the store director.
Thank you. We're here to answer any questions you have about this matter and also to provide you a little bit of background because I know there's been some confusion and issues as it relates to how this application has come before you, including the one issue that was just brought up a moment ago. Let me first start by telling you the same thing that we told the Planning Commission when we were here a few weeks ago. Target and its corporate folks in Minneapolis certainly made some mistakes here. They didn't come to the city when they should have, and we're acknowledging that. That was simply due to Target not knowing or understanding at the time they needed to come and get this council's approval before they started the alcohol sales at that location. And so they went ahead and pursued their state liquor license and were granted their state liquor licenses for both beer and wine and packaged liquor sales, which are two different licenses. They've been granted both back in July, and they are currently operating both. I know it indicates to you in the paperwork that was provided by Target at the time they filed their application that it was only for the beer and wine. That was, again, simply an oversight. At the time they filled out that application, they already had the packaged liquor approval from the state of Michigan. The reason they filled it out the way they did was because in reading your ordinance, which I think they read incorrectly, they didn't think they even needed to apply for a special use permit for the packaged liquor because of the fact it had already been authorized by the state of Michigan. So they had some follow-up conversations, is my understanding. I was not involved at that point, but was retained later for purposes of addressing Planning Commission and this council to help navigate this to the end now. But it's my understanding that in those conversations with staff, it was clarified and confirmed that in fact, of course, we were pursuing packaged liquor as well. But we were told it was not necessarily going to be required to file any kind of amended application or do anything because it would proceed along the lines of approval or requested approval for beer and wine and spirits. So in working with staff throughout this process, Target's in-house people had always made it clear that that's what they were intending, because obviously that's what they already had approved from the state of Michigan. So I know to members of the public who are not party to those conversations, it may appear that the packaged liquor part of this has just kind of come out of thin air. It's always been part of the plan here, just wasn't initially put down in the application. But in the follow-up conversations with staff and in pursuing this matter through the various approvals needed here with the DDA board, which approved it unanimously, with the Planning Commission, which approved it unanimously, we have always indicated the desire is to get, obviously, the approval for the packaged liquor from this board that we already have from the State Liquor Control Commission. So, yes, there were errors in how the documents were filled out. Yes, there were errors in the timing of those documents. All of that was done out of ignorance or mistakes, not anybody trying to pull a fast one on the city of East Lansing or its citizens. Nobody's trying to hide the ball here. We're just playing catch up with a process that Target was not familiar with, because Target has 43 other licenses throughout the state of Michigan. East Lansing is one of the very few locations where this kind of approval is needed to sell alcohol in those stores. So, again, out-of-state company should have contacted us earlier, didn't, and now they're paying the public relations price for that. And obviously, this is inconvenient for all of you. It's embarrassing for the company, but that's the background here. Nothing that was intentional or trying to be misleading.
Go ahead, Ruth.
Just speaking for myself as one council person, I never felt misled. I assumed this was what was going on. Your explanation makes perfect sense. I think we should just move on, in my opinion.
I just want to get an opinion from the city attorney as to whether we're restricted in some way by the actual language of this particular application.
No, actually the code, the special use permit requirement concerns the sale of alcohol. So any alcohol is included in the special use language of the code. So in granting a special use permit, unless you were to restrict it to beer and wine only, it would allow the sale of alcohol. So I don't see a problem with the application specifying. It went through the process as an application for beer, wine, and spirits. So that's the way it proceeded through all of the other approval levels, so I don't see an issue with it.
So the language of the application is not a restriction on our ability to actually include within a special use permit any kind of alcohol that's being sold.
True state.
All right, thanks. Okay, thank you. I don't think, unless anyone has a question. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, anybody else wish to address council on this item? Then I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Haywood?
Thank you. And I'll just reiterate, I do remember those conversations with Mr. Brown. I'm quite certain we clarified that with them. We looked up their liquor licenses and saw that they had an SDD, clarified that they were looking for that as approval, and noticed this public hearing as such. So I think we covered all our bases there.
And when the Planning Commission recommended approval of this, were they aware of this
Yes.
issue? What
Yep.
about the DDA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion on this? Go ahead.
I move approval of a special use permit application, or a special use permit to sell beer, wine, and spirits for purchase for off-premise consumption at the retail store located at 201 East Grand River, subject to the 6 conditions in the referral memo.
Second.
All right, been moved by Councilmember Byer, seconded by Councilmember Draheim. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is item 4.5, consideration of a modified site plan application from Tailwind East Lansing 3 LLC for the property at 6210 Abbott Road to modify the site plan conditions of approval for the Gaslight Village development to remove the limitation on leasing for periods of less than 2 years. The subject property is located in the RM8 Planned Unit Development Zoning District.
Okay.
This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address council regarding this item?
Good evening. Brandon Smith, representing Tailwind Group. Just want to kind of clarify this item and the next. You'll see that both are our company. And you'll probably notice you've heard both of these before. So back in February, I believe, you guys heard a proposal for a site plan that we had to the land to the rear of the Gaslight Village building, which you guys did not approve. Attached to that proposal was also the removal of this 2-year leasing restriction. So when the site plan was denied, that was also pulled off. So that's why you see them separated now. So we're requesting the removal of the 2-year leasing restriction as one item, and then the modified site plan that we came back with tonight. So just in case you're wondering, there is a lot of overlap with the two items. I should be able to answer questions on either, but we'll stick to the 2-year leasing for now.
Any questions? I have a question for you. Within the front building, originally a condominium project, is there any ownership in any of those units at this point in time?
No.
Okay, and it's all rental at this point?
Correct.
Okay. All right, that is my only question. Okay. All right, is there anybody else who wishes to address council on this item? And I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Haywood or whoever?
Our senior planner, Darcy Schmidt's going to go ahead and give a summary of the issue tonight.
Yes, I think the applicant summed it up pretty closely. As the last time that you saw this application was in February, and they had the application packaged with a request to remove the 2-year leasing process. So they've separated these two requests in the event that the site plan doesn't pass or this doesn't pass, that they're not lumped together. So they are requesting this separately from the site plan at this time. And if I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to do that for you.
Any questions? Go ahead.
So Meridian Township had sent us a communication and indicated that they were not in favor of this. Is there any information that you can provide beyond what they had stated in their letter too?
I do not have any additional information from them.
Okay. Or any other questions of Darcy? Okay, so we're back to this. Go ahead.
I move approval of an application to modify the site plan conditions of approval for the Gaslight Village development at 6210 Abbott Road to remove the limitation on leasing periods of less than 2 years.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Byer, seconded by Councilmember Draheim. Any discussion? Go ahead.
That's okay.
I'll just indicate that, I'm going to be voting for this, and I voted against that. I think the last site plan that was connected to this, it is sort of a disappointment because there was, when this was approved originally, this was seen as a condominium project with, townhomes behind it, owner-occupied townhomes behind it. It was quite a project that was killed by the downturn in the economy. There was a tremendous effort to go ahead and sell these units as condominiums. They're beautifully designed, but there just wasn't a market for it anymore after we saw the crash in 2008. So I'm sorry that we have to do this, but I don't want to see this property remain vacant either. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this particular item. All right, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is consideration of the modified site plan application from Tailwind East Lansing 3 LLC for the property at 6210 Abbott Road to modify the site plan conditions of approval for the Gaslight Village development to remove the limitation on, oh, wait a minute, I already said that one. The next Tailwind one. Consideration of a request from Tailwind Group to modify the approved site plan for the property at 6210 Abbott Road for the construction of 50 two-bedroom residential units in a mix of 3 and 4 unit buildings and the conversion of existing commercial space to 2 residential units. The subject property is located in the RM8 Planned Unit Development District. This is a public hearing. Does anyone wish to address council on this particular item?
Brandon Smith again with Tailwind. So just wanted to highlight, I know you can see from the plan, but the changes from the meeting back in February. If you recall, our original proposal was for 18 4-bedroom duplexes, so that would be 36 4-bedroom, 4-bath units, and then 2 single-family standalone homes to match the 2 that are on the south side of the property existing. So that was 152 bedrooms total that were proposed. The main opposition was the desire to keep strictly student housing out of that area, with 4-bedroom, 4.5 baths being essentially have to be a student living there. So as you can see, our modified plan adjusts to a similar style of building, but all of these unit mixes are 2-bedroom, 2.5 baths, so multi-level units with kitchen, living room, half bathroom on the main floor, and then your two full bedrooms upstairs with full bathrooms attached to each. So our goal with that, it's a more inclusive rental base. You can get, working professionals, families, couples, etc. Not just strictly for students, which really does match our demographic that currently is renting in our Gaslight Village property. We do have some other properties in East Lansing that are more, probably over the 90-95% student, but Gaslight Village, our current mix, is a lot more diverse. So we think that will just continue to grow that demographic in that area, and we'd be excited to get the project moving forward after a couple times back here. So take any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Yep.
And is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to address council on this item? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Haywood or Ms. Schmidt?
Yeah, I'll just touch base on some of the things that the applicant didn't cover. This particular application did take into consideration changing some of the infrastructure that was originally there, changing the roadway to a one-way, 20-foot wide circulation around the residential units. They continue to propose the 20-foot wide emergency connection at the north side of the building, the existing building. That would remain a gravel drive. The fire marshal has also requested that all parking be removed on either side of these or on either side of the parking. The infrastructure, underground infrastructure, will have to be modified slightly as well due to the configuration. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So is that the parking that we're looking at then? Is that, or is that the parking that they're proposing?
The parking that they're proposing up at the top here, there's parking, oops, where's my, there we go. This will have to be removed here, and then some parking around here will have to be removed.
But in the development itself?
No, within this development, this is all fine.
Okay, and then in the middle, there's no road now, it's just around the outside?
Just around the center area here.
So would the middle part be grass?
That will be grass, correct.
Oh, I think that's a big improvement on what they had before, that raceway look thing. So.
Go ahead.
So I'm looking at the document Fire Review 3, which
Yes.
lays out the conditions that came from the fire marshal through the fire chief. And do we need to add any conditions to this to implement
Yes,
those restrictions?
I would recommend adding actually 4 additional conditions. One has to do with the electrical vehicle parking spaces. The other 3 have to do with the fire marshal's recommendations. One would be at the discretion of the fire marshal, parking shall be eliminated around the emergency road at the north side of the building. All roads must be a minimum of 20 foot wide. And then the 4th one, there shall be no obstructions or modifications made to the overpass that decrease the current height of the structure.
So the first one was the electric vehicle, and then those 3 followed?
Correct.
And what's the EV requirement?
They would have to have 3 electric vehicle parking spaces. In addition to those conditions, within the motion, the council will want to waive the maximum allowable amount of parking where 198 parking spaces are allowed, and they're proposing 230.
Okay, how many parking spaces are on site at this time?
Currently, without what they're proposing, I do not know exactly. I know what they're proposing. What they're proposing there and the front is 230 altogether.
Right now, they're 4 because they're 2 houses.
Okay, but what would be the required amount of parking?
The required amount of parking would be 198 maximum.
Okay, so,
3 EV spots.
Correct.
and 3 of those should be EV locations,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Darcy,
You go ahead.
is your sense that the reason they're asking for the more is that they have excess parking on the
They
front
have, correct. They have
Okay.
excess parking in the front, and
But they want
to,
it back here, which
They
I
want more
understand.
parking
Okay.
back there,
Okay.
correct.
And this is not just changing the back area, they also want to turn the first floor into residential on the main building.
No, they've changed that recommendation.
Oh, okay.
They're still going to keep that as commercial.
Okay.
Okay, well, the agenda item provides for the conversion of existing commercial space to 2 residential units. That is out.
No, that is not correct.
Okay. So we could strike that. In terms of any motion, let's just make sure that,
You make the motion.
I mean, we just have to eliminate that language, so. Because I don't know why it showed up in the, unless that was the original application or something. Was it?
Yeah, it
Okay,
was their
yeah, got
original
it. Okay,
application.
that's gone. That's good.
We don't have any elevations, we just have, like,
Yes, we have elevations.
where am I, how come I can't see them? Oh, there we go, sorry, yeah.
Very similar to the existing cottage-type architecture that's on in that area. Okay.
It's also similar to the 2 houses that are already there.
Okay, go ahead.
Darcy, could you repeat the language for the condition that starts at the discretion of the fire marshal?
Would you like this?
That
to
would
read
be
from it?
helpful,
I was just
yes.
going to say, I think that would be good.
That would be
Everything
helpful.
read is what would be required for the
you.
motion.
And in terms of, what happened at the planning commission, did they discuss like the removal of the excess parking as opposed to waiving the restriction? What happened with that?
What wasn't really clear with the fire marshal's memo right away was there's, on the drawing, there's actually an area that says, is marked off that says no parking. So it appears as if they've accommodated the fire marshal's request, but I don't know that that's all that he wanted to be
Okay.
removed. and that shows that right here. It's hatched here, and it says no parking. So by adding that other condition, it allows the fire marshal to make sure that these parking spaces here aren't interrupting.
Okay, but what I'm really asking is, you know, going from 230 to 198, so there's 32 additional parking spaces there over our maximum that we permit.
That's
And
correct.
so was there discussion about requiring them to remove,
There was.
to put planters in there, to turn it back into green space as opposed to anything?
There was discussion about that.
And can you just sort of tell me exactly what the thinking was?
They talked about it briefly, but they felt that there wasn't a lot of room. That they do have islands in the front area, and to do that would be costly to do with the project already at the costly for the rear portion, having to redo infrastructure.
Okay. All right, any other questions of Darcy? Okay, thank you very much. All right, back to council. Is there a motion on this?
I move approval of the request from Tailwind Group to modify the approved site plan for the property at 6210 Abbott Road for the construction of 50 two-bedroom residential units in a mix of 3 and 4 unit buildings, subject to the, how many conditions? 18 conditions outlined in the referral memo.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Draheim, seconded by Councilmember Byer. Any additional amendments? Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to move a 19th condition to read 3 electric vehicle charging stations shall be provided in accord with the city code.
Second.
Okay, been moved by the Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Draheim. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Anything else?
Yes, as it happens. I would like to move a 20th condition to read, at the discretion of the fire marshal, parking shall be eliminated around the emergency road at the north side of the building.
And I just want to ask Tom one thing about that language. Is that parking eliminated doesn't necessarily?
Yeah, I would remove the word discretion from there. Just eliminate it.
Okay, so let me try the following. Parking shall be eliminated around the emergency road at the north side of the building. Okay, that's my motion.
Okay. So it's been seconded by Councilmember Draheim. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other amendments?
Yes, condition 21, all roads must be a minimum of 20 feet wide.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and seconded by Councilmember Byer. Any discussion on that one? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Are there additional amendments?
Yes, the 22nd condition, there shall be no obstructions or modifications made to the overpass that decrease the current height of the structure.
It's been moved by the Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Byer. Any discussion on that one? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any further amendments? All right, we're back to the same main motion, or did you have another amendment?
I did.
Okay.
I was going to propose a 23rd condition. To read, the applicant shall remove pavement from the site in the amount of 32 parking spaces and landscape the affected area as required by city landscape requirements.
All right, I'll second. Go ahead. And you want to discuss that?
Well, so this addresses the overage of the parking spaces. I don't particularly want to grant a waiver for excess parking. I think this would help with stormwater management. It would help with green space. It's a slightly weird-looking area there in front between the building and Abbott Road. The whole design is slightly odd. I think this would help brighten the area up, and I would leave it to their discretion to decide where to remove the parking.
Okay, I've got a question. involving this? Because the original, I don't know whether the number we received, 198, reflects the fact that that those other spaces are no longer going to be residential spaces. They will be continuing as commercial spaces. So do they need those additional spaces for future commercial development in that building?
They're based on commercial.
Okay, so the 198 also includes the evaluation of the commercial operation there?
Correct.
Even though those are vacant at this point in time?
Correct.
Okay,
They have 200 and how much, Eric?
230.
230,
So we have, you said 32?
32, which would get it back to the maximum, so we wouldn't have to issue a waiver.
The maximum of 195.
It's the first time we've ever had a request for a waiver on top.
No, we've had them
Okay.
before,
Oh, really?
in cases where there was an argument that there was enough commercial traffic that they needed it.
But for residential, I don't think I've ever seen it.
I don't know about that, yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question, Tom? So is what Eric read, I just want to make sure that we don't still have to do a waiver. That's a plant's needing a waiver, because it remove 32 parking spots and replace with landscaping.
Sure.
Okay.
And I don't think the location matters on the parking spot, so you don't have to designate
Okay.
where they get removed from.
And those 32 would include whatever the fire marshal says you can't park there?
Well, I think the fire marshal's conditions are already in there, so yes,
Yeah.
that, those have been satisfied.
All right, is there any other further discussion? Then we need to call for a vote on this particular amendment. All in favor of the motion?
Shall I restate the motion? Just-
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Bruce says no. Okay. The applicant shall remove pavement in the amount of 32 parking spaces and landscape the affected areas according to city landscape requirements.
And they would be designing their own parking lot out there in accordance with our requirements. Okay. All right, all in favor of the motion to amend the main motion and add this condition, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, are there any other amendments? All right, we're back at the main motion as amended. All in favor of the main motion as amended, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I'll just note that I agree with Councilmember Byer. This is a much improved project over what we saw in February, so thanks for working on it. The next item on our agenda is, we're at the business agenda. Okay, cool. Is item 5.1, consideration of an application from RJB Enterprises LLC to modify the approved site plan and special use permit for the medical marijuana provisioning center at 1950 Merritt Road to expand the use into the existing basement. Mr. Haywood, is this you?
This is me.
Okay.
Let me just pull up the site plan here really quick. Okay. Okay, so what we're looking at here is, this involves the Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center that was approved back in March 26th of this year at 1950 Merritt Road. So when this was originally approved, it involved a provisioning center on the first floor. All of their support activities, everything involved in the provisioning center would be conducted on the first floor. At such time that they started to produce get ready for their final site plan and construction drawings, they invited me to take a look at it. We kind of looked at it together, and they were proposing some modifications to the exterior, some pretty basic things that otherwise would be approved administratively. However, in the course of their submission for administrative review and approval, it appeared that they had a basement that really wasn't really part of the utilized plan in the original proposal that now they feel that they can use. So they're proposing to move their storage facilities, their office, waiting room, staff room, bud room, vault, and storage all down to the basement and increase their retail area on the first floor by almost twice the size. So of course that caught our attention. Otherwise, it's not an objectionable change from a site utilization perspective. It doesn't increase parking substantially to go over what they are already providing. And otherwise, the improvements are fairly straightforward. So this is really just a straightforward request for reconsideration for utilization of the basement, increasing the retail area. So I want to make sure I cover it all. So otherwise, all of the other conditions of approval from March would be satisfied still in this proposal. They are proposing some minor modifications to the exterior. There was a vestibule on the south side of the building that served as the entrance, is very small, just a double door enclosure, that's going away. They're reconfiguring their windows a little bit to be a little more modern design. But otherwise, they're within the administrative approvals. I think they're at 3% change, and then some additional landscaping. Now, of course, the site plan shows the required sidewalks along Merritt Road. In fact, the sidewalks go all the way down to Hazlitt Road to connect to the planned extensions that the city has on Hazlitt. So they're fulfilling their obligation for sidewalks as well. So with that, staff's recommendation is to approve. There are two additional conditions that staff would recommend, or at least two conditions on this approval, and that being that the final floor plan be consistent with the plans that were submitted here of September 9th, and that the final plans be consistent with the City Council conditions of approval in April. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wondering whether you, staff, or perhaps police have any concerns about sort of moving the office and the safe downstairs and away from the retail space, whether there are any concerns with that are raised.
We don't, but we did check with our building department and our fire department, and they didn't have any significant conditions. There was some talk about whether suppression would be required, and they're still evaluating that.
Okay.
All right. The two conditions that you mentioned, were those conditions that would have to be added this evening through a motion?
They're included in your.
I can make it part of the original motion.
Okay, just make it part of it.
I'll do
Okay.
that.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay, I move approval of an application from RJB Enterprises LLC to modify the approved site plan and special use permit for the medical marijuana provisioning center at 1950 Merritt Road to expand the use into the existing basement, subject to two additional conditions. The final floor plan shall be consistent with the plans dated September 9th, 2019, and the final plan shall be consistent with the City Council conditions of approval enumerated in the approval letter of April 1st, 2019.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Byer, seconded by Councilmember Stevens. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is item 5.2, which is consideration of termination of brownfield plan and forbearance agreement and release and indemnification agreement for brownfield plan number 7, which was Campus Village 2, and actually this is a pretty important change for us, so go ahead.
Good evening. So I will try to be succinct here. Essentially, Campus Village 2 development agreement included a provision that the developer would convert rentals in Chesterfield Hills. And over the course of time, there was 7 that were converted. The economy changed, the developer came back, there were several modifications to the agreement, ultimately leading to the developer agreeing to pay the city $300,000 to fund an account that the city would then use to make conversions of rentals in Chesterfield Hills neighborhood. Those payments started to be made, and they ceased, and the total that the city has received thus far is $150,000. Per a forbearance agreement, the Brownfield Authority agreed to hold the reimbursements from the Brownfield plan that the developer was entitled to until such time as the city was made whole on the $300,000 that was owed. Ultimately, those payments still were not made. The Brownfield plan reimbursement payments were held, and ultimately the plan, the period of the plan ended after tax year 2018. So there's about $416,000 in that account. The developer is entitled to those funds. Ultimately, they were assigned through the course of this to a third party. That third party, the assignee, is actually entitled to those funds, but those funds that will not be transmitted from the BRA until such time as the city is made whole for the $300,000. So essentially what this agreement does is takes $150,000 out of the funds that the BRA is holding to the assignee, pays the city those funds. The balance of the reimbursements would be made to the assignee. The assignee still owed the $150,000 from the developer, but that is now between them. The city, the BRA are out of it, and essentially we are also held harmless with whatever transpires between those two parties. So that is as succinct as I can be. Ultimately, this also terminates the Brownfield plan, which has come to an end, and creates the full $300,000 account for the city. The next question is, how do we go about spending those funds? I would recommend that we place that on the council's discussion-only meeting for as soon as you wish, and we will be ready to have that discussion as early as the 22nd.
Okay, thank you. Any questions at time? That was not only succinct, but very specifically succinct. All right, and Tom, all this works for us?
Yes, I drafted these agreements, and
Okay.
I'm happy with the way they turned out.
All right, is there a motion on this? Go ahead.
Motion to terminate the Brownfield plan and forbearance agreement and release. You know what, actually, make sure I have this motion right.
Approve execution of that agreement.
Hang on 1 second. Show my full language. Sorry, what was that?
I think you want to approve the mayor executing that termination agreement.
I make a motion to allow the mayor to enter into that termination agreement.
Can we state the whole thing?
Yeah.
Tom,
Could
maybe you can help
it
us.
be
Yeah.
something like approve execution by the mayor of a termination of Brownfield plan and forbearance agreement and release an indemnification agreement for Brownfield plan number 7, Campus Village 2?
So moved.
There we go.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Stevens, seconded by Councilmember Draheim. Any further discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Really important for us to know that we've got that fund out there for Chesterfield Hills. Finally, we'll get something done, and we can talk about the properties that might be impactful for. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the very last item of the evening, which you may remember from the very first comments that we received, right? No? Just two more? No, this is it. Introduce, 5.3, which is introduce and refer to the Planning Commission Ordinance 1473, an ordinance to conditionally rezone the property.
That's what he's talking about.
he's reading. Am I looking at something different?
Refresh your page.
Oh, God. Sorry,
You're on the
I'm
lame
just
duck.
going on what's on my
You're on
computer
the lame
screen,
duck page.
okay?
So let me get back, let me repeat that. It's item 5.3, which is introduce and refer to the Planning Commission ordinance 1473, an ordinance to conditionally rezone the property at 1108 East Grand River Avenue from medical marijuana overlay district inside the DDA to medical marijuana overlay district outside the DDA. We heard a presentation from the attorney for this group earlier this evening. Mr. Haywood.
Thank you. So I have on the screen here for you the site plan of the proposal. You're not approving a site plan here, but it's just kind of for illustration purposes to help you understand the site. So this is a conditional rezoning request. As mentioned, the request is to change the district from the overlay inside the DDA to the overlay outside of the DDA. So just to dial back the clock, the Provisioning Center was originally denied by council on April 23rd of 2019, and which kind of set the wheels in motion to approve the one at 1234 East Grand River. This one is closer than the required 1,000-foot separation, so the applicant is trying to figure out a way to make the location work by proposing this conditional rezoning request. They did, in between their denial and today's application, receive a variance for parking for the facility. However, the variance was for two things. One, setback requirement to the side yard and the number of parking spaces required. What was unusual about that request is that they were proposing it to be a liquor store again. So it seems to be kind of maybe switching to a use here, and now medical marijuana provisioning center again. So and what's unusual about this request is that they break their conditional offer down into two parts, one being a conditional rezoning request and then conditions to offer. And the conditional rezoning request just simply states our code requirements for separation and then strikes language. And then they go on to offer 5 conditions about how they would dispense of their liquor license. They'll rehabilitate the property based on this site plan, that they wouldn't deliver medical marijuana to MSU campus, certain donations, and pledging to the art fund. So staff's recommendation is that this is an improper request for rezoning. It's really a request to amend our code. It's a text amendment request, and that's kind of how we view it. So our recommendation is to not introduce the ordinance and direct the applicant to find another means, possibly through recommending a text amendment.
Okay, any questions, David? Go ahead.
So the variance they did because their current use is a liquor store, but would the parking requirements and those side yard setback requirements be any different?
They would be no different.
So, I mean, if they were to go down this road, if we were to go down this road, then that variance is still legit regardless
That's
of what
correct,
that use is
yes.
based on this, okay.
Go ahead.
There are some things I do not understand about this, and one of them is the way the ordinance is written. It says as an amendment to conditionally rezone an area that is inside the DDA to an area that is outside the DDA, but it's still inside the DDA because the DDA exists in its current form. So how are we even thinking about this?
If I could address that.
Yes, please.
Because David had some issues bringing this before council, and I had some issues bringing this before council. The applicant was insistent that this was a proper way to get the property to be licensed as a medical marijuana facility. I advised the applicant that I didn't believe it was, but he certainly had a right to have council make that determination. I advised the applicant that, just as staff did, that it wasn't really a rezoning request as much as it was a request to change the text of the ordinance itself for the DDA. So I advise the applicant that he should make that request to council. But the applicant was insistent that this was the proper way to go, and I don't know if he's got an agenda to appeal it or do whatever, but I concur with Mr. Haywood's recommendation that you not introduce this because of that very concern you just raised, that it's not really a conditional rezoning. I would note that our code, as well as the ZEA says an owner of land may voluntarily offer in writing, and the local unit of government may approve certain use and development of land as a condition to rezoning of the land or an amendment to a zoning map. That's not being requested here. It also, our code says an owner of land may voluntarily offer in writing conditions relating to the use and or development of land for which a rezoning is requested. And again, that's really not what's being requested. There's another provision of our code that I think is important that it says the owner's offer of conditions may not purport to authorize uses or developments not permitted in the requested new zoning district. And that's really a question as to whether this is a use that is permitted in this district, considering there already is one that basically precludes other uses. So again, my recommendation is that on a request, normally this would have been on a consent agenda to introduce and refer to the Planning Commission. I discussed with Mr. Haywood the fact that it should probably still come to council because of the applicant's insistence. It's not, we just can't let something linger, in the administrative process. So we needed a council decision on it.
Go ahead. Question for you, Tom. So this is a little bit of speculation, but could the reason why they wanted this specifically rather than a language change to our actual ordinance is because the ordinance change would then give cause for other properties besides their own to apply for?
I don't know their true motivations.
So let me rephrase. If the language were to be changed in our ordinance, could other properties that were within 1,000 feet now apply to?
Anything within 500 feet.
Okay,
would, if that code was changed.
Sure.
So I know this council is very specific on keeping that 1,000-foot distance in the DDA. So from my perspective, only if council is interested in reducing that or eliminating that provision for the DDA should they consider this application.
Understood.
Do you have a comment also?
Actually, it's a whole different question, so Councilmember Dewan.
Minus two.
Okay, so I wasn't actually intrigued by the comment from the person proposing this, that there really is no other provisioning center within 1,000 feet right now.
That's an assertion that they're making because while we approved a provisioning center for the area, they haven't come into existence according to the applicant yet, so therefore they can get approval themselves. From my perspective, the approval of what, if you go down that route, you're approving multiple properties and violating the 1,000-foot separation distance that you've established, because you wouldn't necessarily be revoking the other approval.
So that's a legitimate way to look at it, that one does exist because you've approved it.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
So I have a quick follow-on question, and it's just a question of staff. Do we have a timeline by which that approval expires? So on the 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, it's a year.
It's a year, okay.
Yeah.
So
There's
if they don't begin construction, if they don't.
Yeah, there's an extension ability, but there are time limits.
Okay, okay. So my question is actually just really want to clarify, because I think it's that last point you made, Tom, because we rezone things, all the time. But the issue in this case is that we can't rezone it to a use that isn't allowed in either zone, or even in what we rezone, because it's still in the DDA. It's not.
Yeah, arguably, the other side of that is, the other argument to that is that that use is allowed in this district, but again, because of the existence of the 1,000-foot requirement, I think any zoning application would be treated as a, like if he applied for a variance for that distance requirement, that would be treated as a use variance rather than, which would be prohibited rather than just a size and space requirement variance.
But we don't prohibit this use in the DDA. We do prohibit it in the overlay district. And so if we rezoned this out of the overlay district,
It still wouldn't be.
If it's not in the overlay, if it's not in the overlay district, it's not a permitted use at all.
right, okay.
We also can't think about the overlay district as a traditional zoning district because it's written in as text, as a text description. So where a color on a map is a district, and then there is text that goes with what's allowed there. This is almost strictly a written district. And so the only way to rezone or amend that district or establish it somewhere else is through the text amendment process.
Special use permit requirement is the problem, or, I get that, well.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, David? Is there a motion? Go ahead.
You would recommend that we vote on a motion?
Yes.
So I move that we introduce and refer to the Planning Commission Ordinance 1437, an ordinance to conditionally rezone the property at 1108 East Grand River Avenue from medical marijuana overlay district inside the DDA to medical marijuana overlay district outside the DDA.
And that would be 73, not 37, right?
1473.
1473,
Okay.
yes.
And it's been moved and seconded. Do you have a comment?
I had a comment.
Okay.
I just wanted to put it out there that if the ordinance was to specifically strike that language regarding the 1,000 feet specifically in that district and to consider just making it 500 feet across the board, I actually made that amendment during our discussion there. I'd be happy to consider that again. This specifically, I am not in favor of.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I'll just say the same thing. I mean, I was in favor of that then. And I think, the other thing that every time I look at this one in particular, I think the opportunity to change and renovate what is a not terribly good-looking property.
Landmark.
I know, but it's a really crappy-looking landmark these days.
It's a
So,
historic building.
but I agree, this mechanism doesn't seem to work.
All right, I don't see how this is a conditional zoning request in any way. So in one sense, I don't even see how we vote on this. It almost gives it credence that it doesn't deserve. But we've been requested to do that, and so I'll be voting against this. All right, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of introducing and referring to the Planning Commission ordinance number 1473 indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, same side. Aye. All right, the motion fails. Go ahead.
I have a point of order.
Sure.
Mayor, concerning item 4.4, the motion to approve that, I think, was subject to 6 conditions. There are actually 8 conditions.
The second 2 conditions are rather irrelevant in some respects. One of them just requires that they comply with state law by maintaining state liquor licenses, and the other one simply says they have to record the memorandum of special use permit, which is already required by our code. So I was comfortable deleting those last 2 conditions.
That's why I did it that way.
Yeah, right. All right, I think that's it. We're adjourned for the evening. Thank you all for coming.